Chapter 1761. Celestial Bath Pool. Chapter 1761. Celestial Bath Pool. That's right. Small Tower nodded frankly. However, the growth of this mother tree was also expedited, and it is far from becoming a source power. Thus, it is presently impossible for you to extract the source power. Then how much longer would it take? Ling Han asked. At least a few eras, Small Tower replied calmly. Ling Han shook his head. There was no way to expect it then. A few 100 million years was too long. Perhaps it would be faster for him to find another reincarnation tree. In the celestial realm, there was definitely no small number of celestial kings that had lived longer than an epoch. No matter what, the 7 Lives Divine Clouds was considerably satisfied with the conditions inside the Black Tower. There was no small number of medicinal ingredients here, enough for it to rule over. There was a group of lackeys for it to boss around, and there was a mother tree which was the source of all the celestial medicines in this world too. The 7 Lives Divine Clouds made an agreement with Ling Han. Every 1,000 years, it would provide some celestial fluid for Ling Han, but Ling Han also warned it that it definitely could not be sprayed out from a specific part of its body. This celestial medicine said that there was another celestial medicine which was on extremely bad terms with it in this place. The two of them would always end up fighting when they met each other. The other celestial medicine was called Ultimate Celestial Elimination, and what it contained was completely the regulations of poison. Anywhere it passed, all living creatures would perish. Thus, the medicinal ingredients here feared this ultimate celestial elimination very much, and begged the 7 Lives Divine Clouds to stop the ultimate celestial elimination from going around anywhere it liked. Part of the reason why the two celestial medicines would fight was because of this, and the other part was that both wanted to become the boss of this place. And now, the 7 Lives Divine Clouds was trying its best to spur Ling Han on into killing the ultimate celestial elimination. Ling Han naturally ignored it. He did not have the slightest interest in the regulations of poison. Furthermore, while the 7 Lives Divine Clouds, which was similarly a celestial medicine, and might have no fear of its poisonous traits, he himself was not immune. If he were to go and retrieve the ultimate celestial elimination, the possibility of him dying was much higher. Even the large black dog shook his head. If anyone wanted to retrieve a celestial medicine like the ultimate celestial elimination, he would at least have to be an immortal palace tier elite to be able to accomplish the feat. Now that we've got the celestial medicine, let's go, Ling Han said. Brat, your palate is really too easily satisfied. How could you be satisfied with a single celestial medicine? The large black dog scoffed. There are lots of good stuff here. Ahead of us is the treasury, and don't tell me you don't want a pseudo-celestial tool? Ling Han's need for a pseudo-celestial tool was really not all that high, but he was very interested in top-grade godly metal and pseudo-divine metal. He thought that since they were already thieves, then they might as well get some more treasures. He could think of repayment after he became a celestial king, he said to himself. The large black dog looked like he was taking a walk in a park and went in twists and turns while leading Ling Han and the Empress. Very soon, they had walked out of the mountains, and a group of palaces appeared ahead of them, stretching out for who knew how many miles. Those are all treasure troves. The large black dog looked down from above, his eyes shining. There is a protective formation, Ling Han said after a glance. In front of me, there is no such thing as formations, the large black dog declared proudly. They arrived in front of the first palace, and the large black dog immediately began unraveling the formation. Ling Han also lent him a hand. The man and dog cooperated together, and they very soon created an opening in the protective formation of the palace. You are the type suitable to become a thief, brat, the large black dog praised. What can you expect from a hog but a grunt? Why does a compliment from your mouth sound so awkward? Ling Han fanned his hands. They entered the palace. This was a store of ingredients, and primarily contained fabrics. They were not ordinary materials, but consisted of the silk spun by immortal beasts, as well as woven from the fur of immortal beasts. And this could not be considered celestial material yet, and could only be considered pseudo-celestial material. Only celestial king level was worthy of being called celestial material, but pseudo-celestial material was already very extraordinary. Ling Han naturally would not be reserved and gathered everything. The large black dog and Ling Han began fighting over the spoils. Not only had they stuffed their spatial god tools to their fullest, they even wrapped themselves in it. They were really pretentious. After they had swept through this palace completely, they went to the second palace. After breaking through the formation and entering, they saw that there were actually multiple pools here. Huh! Ling Han and his group all exclaimed in surprise. These pools were really too extraordinary, exuding the light of great Tao. Regulations had taken solid form, swimming in the water like fishes. Celestial bath pools! The large black dog called out loudly, and immediately jumped into one of the pools with a splash. He opened his mouth and simply floated around in the pool of water like that, absorbing the precious essence in the fluids of the pool. Ling Han and the Empress also jumped in respectively. Unfortunately, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden would not be able to enjoy such benefits. It was invigorating. Great Tao entered into Ling Han's body, using the waters of the pool as a bridge. It seemed as if the heaven and earth were clearing his doubts and offering teachings inside his body. It was possible for even an idiot's cultivation level to soar greatly. Ling Han couldn't help but be stunned. Just what kind of heaven-defying technique was this? He was even more curious by now. Which major sect did this treasury belong to? They were definitely exorbitantly wealthy. It was unknown how many treasures were contained in the waters of the pool. There was saintly medicine of the highest grade, and even a small amount of celestial medicine, as well as the essence of immortal beasts. Ling Han could see a tip of the iceberg through absorbing the pool's fluids. Those were the horns of a few immortal beasts that had been ground into dust, and their murderous aura had been erased by an elite. Finally, they turned into a medicinal bath with boundless benefits. He was rich. He was rich. Ling Han and his group did not make any sound, and tried their best to absorb the treasure fluid as much as possible. There were only a total of 10 such pools. 7 days later, Ling Han was the first to absorb all the essence in a pool. He climbed out and entered into the 4th pool. 2 days later, the Empress and the large black dog came out at practically the same time, and entered into the 5th and 6th pool, respectively. It was clear from this that it was Ling Han's physique that was still the strongest. The Empress's divine fetus allowed her to split out 9 doppelgangers to simultaneously share and absorb the medicinal effects together, but the large black dog was actually incredibly freakish as well. This was a little shocking. Could it be that it was a divine fetus as well? When Ling Han thought that this damn dog could possibly be a divine fetus as well, he felt the words divine fetus had become very murky from now onwards. The gap between them soon became wider. When Ling Han entered into the 7th pool, a whole 3 days had passed before the Empress and the large black dog finally entered into the 8th and 9th pool, respectively. When Ling Han entered into the 10th pool, the Empress and the large black dog entered respectively only after he had absorbed about half of the medicinal effects in it. The 3 people worked at the same time, and very soon absorbed the 10th pool completely as well. A heat energy soared in Ling Han's body, immediately drying his clothes. He burped, and could see the divine light of great Tao had turned into divine red clouds that spluttered out. That was because the regulations in his body were too deep and resounding, and he did not manage to digest them completely, so they had soared out of his body. It couldn't be helped. Who asked them to be thieves? They naturally were more concerned about consuming first before slowly digesting what they had eaten. These pools could not be moved. Otherwise, Ling Han would definitely have carried them off and slowly absorbed them. The condition now was actually very wasteful. Gee! It was at this moment that the great doors of the palace opened, and a person walked in. He was a young man who looked very handsome. His expression was filled with anticipation, and he appeared to be incredibly excited. However, he immediately discovered the presence of 2 other people and a dog in the palace, and his expression suddenly became very dramatic. This could be imagined because it was really too unexpected. Ling Han was also surprised. He realized that this world was really too small. That person was Han Chi. Could it be that this was the treasury of the Han clan? Chapter 1762, Advancing to Second Severance. Chapter 1762, Advancing to Second Severance. Han Chi gaped, completely incapable of believing his own eyes. This place was the treasury of the Han clan, and also the most heavily guarded location. Putting aside the fact that outsiders wouldn't be able to come in here at all, even for the Han clan itself, there were not many members that were allowed to come here, either. He was the youngest son of the patriarch of the Han clan, and thus was given special privileges. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, he could experience a celestial bath here. Not only would it stabilize his cultivation level, it could further increase his strength. When he used this opportunity to reach the middle stage, or even the late stage of the first severance, he would go and seek Ling Han out to personally take revenge for their previous grudge. His cultivation level could soar just by taking a bath. Amazing, right? Hee, this was the power of a 3-star force. But Han Chi could never have imagined that when he pushed these doors open, he would actually see 3 outsiders here. And what made him feel even more stifled was that one of them was actually Ling Han. How was this possible? These words kept going over and over in his head. How could this be? How could this be? How could this be? After at least a few breaths, he suddenly came back to himself. These 3 guys actually absorbed all the essence in the celestial bath pools. Looking at the color of the pool waters, he knew that it had completely turned into ordinary clear water. His expression immediately became extremely miserable. That was his celestial medicine bath, yet it had now been absorbed completely by his enemy. This almost caused his heart to shatter. Why you? He pointed at Ling Han, his whole body trembling and face extraordinarily pale. He could not even muster up a single breath. Ling Han gave an "oh" and asked the large black dog, "You already knew that this was the Han clan's place?" "That's right. Do you think that your grandpa dog is so idle and free?" The large black dog scoffed. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "This is the first time that I think that you have done a good deed. Grandpa Dog has always done only good deeds. What people call as the epitome of morality is Grandpa Dog," the large black dog declared, completely shameless. This large black dog was really quite interesting. It was aware of the various incidents of the Han clan coercing Ling Han, and thus brought him here to rob the Han clan blind. This deserved a full cup of wine. Why you? Han Chi's breath still had not been mustered up, but his expression was already turned from white to green, and he could possibly faint at any time. Those were 10 celestial bath pools, and who knew how many billion years was needed to prepare all of them? If he was not the direct son of the ancestor of the Han clan, how could he possibly be allowed to come here for a bath the moment he advanced to the first severance? But even so, he could only enter into a single celestial bath pool. Otherwise, he would definitely be heavily punished by the clan, and it was not impossible for him to be even executed. And now, all 10 celestial bath pools had been completely sucked dry. "All of you, die." Han Chi finally exploded. He summoned a flag, and the moment it unfurled, a sudden air of extreme coldness spread out. Ka. Thick layers of ice appeared on the pillars and floor tiles of the palace. Ling Han took a step forward, and the 9 heavens flames surged. Boom! The severe coldness was instantly stopped. He crossed his arms behind his back and stepped towards Han Chi. The 9 heavens flame blazed, splitting the ice in half, allowing him to calmly and leisurely approach Han Chi. Han Chi gritted his teeth and waved the flag with all his might, attempting to stop Ling Han's approach. It was useless. He had only just entered the first severance, so how was he supposed to match Ling Han? Even if the flag in his grasp was a pseudo-celestial tool, it was useless. At most, it could only display the might of the peak stage of the first severance in his hands, and in front of Ling Han, this was less than nothing. Seeing Ling Han had already come very close, Han Chi could only grit his teeth, turn around, and run. This was the territory of the Han clan, and who knew how many elites were standing guard here? How could Ling Han be allowed to do as he liked here? But his body had just turned around when Ling Han clutched his neck with a single move. Han Chi couldn't help but be greatly shocked. Could it be that he would have to destroy his physical body again? Yet Ling Han did not make a move. He knew that there was definitely a protective technique that an elite had placed in Han Chi's body and couldn't bother himself to spare the effort either. He directly sealed off Han Chi's cultivation level and then tossed him over to the large black dog. Is there any way to make him suffer as much as possible under the condition that his life is not harmed? The large black dog's eyes turned, and he immediately showed a hint of excitement. Leave it to me. But then, his expression immediately changed. Oh no, this brat has touched the restrictions, and there are presently elites of the Han clan rushing over. Let's retreat quickly. Ling Han nodded. Though they had only robbed 2 treasure palaces here, and there were a considerable number of other places they had not emptied out yet, how would they be able to match immortal palace tier elites? Retreat, retreat, retreat. They went back the same way they had come. After they had exited the final protective formation, the large black dog still spared some effort to repair the formation, restoring it to a flawless condition. In this way, the Han clan would have completely no idea where they had come in from. And thus, they could also leave a back door for themselves. In future, they could continue to enter from this spot. Then, they traveled back to where the bushes were, yet saw that there would be occasional elites streaking past in the skies, as well as powerful divine scents doing multiple sweeps. Clearly, the entire Han clan had already been alerted completely, and they were intending to find their uninvited guests. The large black dog set up a temporary transfer formation, which only sent them out of the surrounding diameter of 10,000 miles. However, this was already outside the territory of the Han clan. Then, they circled back and activated the formation again. With a flash of light, they had already returned to Dark Moon City. After their taking the formation apart, no one would know what they had done or where they had gone. The large black dog carried Han Chi off with it with a snicker and came back only after half a day had passed. However, Han Chi had disappeared. The large black dog explained, "Grandpa dog stuffed that brat under a latrine pit. I guarantee that there is no way that the Han clan could find him, even if they turned the whole celestial realm upside down." Ling Han's expression involuntarily became strange. Indeed, what celestial level elite would want to look under a latrine pit? Furthermore, celestials were immortal, so with the fact that Han Chi was buried underneath a latrine pit, he could not possibly die for billions of years, yet he would never see the light of day again, either. The large black dog was indeed two-faced to the extreme. The consequences of offending him were very serious. Ling Han and the Empress entered into seclusion. They had absorbed all 10 celestial bath pools, and this was something accumulated by the Han clan over who knew how many billions of years even a 3-star force needed innumerable billions of years to be able to accumulate such resources, so how valuable was it? A month later, they emerged from the Black Tower. Suddenly, tribulation clouds gathered. They were both about to break through to the second severance. The two of them greeted the heavenly tribulation head-on, and with how freakish they were, they naturally survived it easily. Second severance. They were both very excited, and did not think that they would have advanced into the second severance so quickly. However, this was only possible by relying on the accumulated resources of a 3-star force. Of course, the other reason was also because they had the reincarnation tree, which allowed them to digest these benefits in the nick of time. Not long after, the large black dog also scrambled over. He had actually advanced to the second severance as well. Ling Han was already able to remain calm in the face of this freak dog's strangeness. Han Hongfei has already left Dark Moon City, and just nice. We can return and play around again at the Ding clan, Ling Han said coldly. Previously, he only knew that there was not a single good person in the Ding clan, but he had never imagined that they would actually be so deranged to actually create an evil object like the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. If that kind of evil tool was successfully refined, it meant that millions and millions of lives had been erased. Otherwise, it was definitely impossible that this evil tool could possess such frightening might. Chapter 1763, Insta-kill a third severance. Chapter 1763, Insta-kill a third severance. Han Hongfei had left. He had not left willingly, but had rather been forced into leaving by the elites of the Black Moon sect. There was no helping it. This was the territory of the Black Moon sect, and what had you, a young soul elite, come for? To strut around and show off? Even if an immortal palace tier elite from the Han clan had come, which the Black Moon sect could not deal with, didn't they still have the Fu clan behind them? Since the Ding clan did not have elites on the level of dividing soul tier, whom did Ling Han have to fear? He and the Empress went to the Ding clan once again. The demons here. When they saw Ling Han, the guards at the entrance all screamed shrilly in their fear. They did not even bother with their job of guards anymore, and hurriedly turned around and fled, yelling sharply as they went. Ling Han stroked his chin. Was he really that frightening? Evil brat, have you come to accept your death? Ding Shan and Ding Song appeared at the same time. In these few days, Ding Shan had also returned from the Black Moon sect. Evil brat? Ling Han chuckled. You guys have refined such an evil object like the bell of 10,000 ghosts, so who exactly is evil here? We have several tens of thousands of clansmen in our Ding clan, yet more than half of them have been slaughtered at your hand, so if not you, who is the great evil here? Ding Shan stated menacingly. No matter what, he could not have imagined that a brat that had just advanced to the severing mundane tier would actually bring such a terrifying calamity to his clan. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he retorted, Everyone says advancing to the severing mundane tier is severing one's mortal bonds, but as I see it, what all of you have severed is your conscience. How dare you? Ding Shan roared in fury. He charged out, shooting out a fist, and it seemed as if the heaven and earth itself was about to collapse. Ling Han stood with his arms crossed behind his back, neither moving nor evading, neither parrying nor blocking. You're courting death. Ding Shan was so furious even his beard was trembling. He was a third severance elite, and Ling Han actually dared not to move or evade. That was really too arrogant. But that would be good too. You dare to confront me head-on, and that is a move to court your own death. At the side, Ding Song also revealed a cold smirk. This brat was really puffed up with conceit. Did he think that he could match even a third severance? Ding Shan arrived, his entire body wrapped in the power of time. Regulations had taken the form of chains. Jiang, Jiang, Jiang. The multiple chains suddenly shot out, making it seem as if his whole person had become a porcupine. He stretched his arms wide to wrap them around Ling Han, wanting to use these chains of regulations to pierce directly through Ling Han, giving him an endless agony. If Ling Han was allowed to die easily, that would really be letting off this evil brat too lightly. Yo, so enthusiastic. Ling Han chuckled, but his tone immediately turned cold in the next instant. Unfortunately, I cannot afford to take this kind of deranged, demented embrace from you. Hopefully, you can still be this arrogant later on. Ding Shan had already pounced on him. Ling Han moved, his right hand grabbing directly into the power of time. He, too, channeled the tide of the ages, and the two regulations canceled each other out. Suddenly, a river of time appeared, and some previous memories of their lives could be seen in it, but they were all vague and obscure, and could not be grasped at all. Ding Shan's expression immediately became incredibly dramatic because he saw a giant hand that could not be halted reaching out towards his head. It was as if it could not be touched by any technique, and also seemed as if it itself was a manifestation of regulations, and was thus capable of being so absolutely unrestrained. He almost died in shock and hurriedly screeched to a forceful halt, wanting to leap backwards and retreat. You think you can escape? Ling Han smirked coldly. Pa! His palm descended and grabbed Ding Shan's forehead. This position was really too humiliating. A great third severance Grand Elder, a being with a limitless lifespan, actually had his head held by another. If this spread out, how would Ding Shan have the face to see others in future? He quickly began to struggle, waving both his arms, kicking his legs madly, and shooting out multiple attacks of power of regulation, wanting to force Ling Han to release him. Ling Han gave a cold humph, and with a shake of his right hand, pa, 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 the sounds of bones breaking rang out repeatedly. Ding Shan was like a snake that had been gripped by its weak point. Instantly, all the bones in his body had been shattered. Then, his limbs drooped weakly, no longer having any ability to fight back. At the sidelines, Ding Song felt a chill seeping from beneath the soles of his feet and directly spreading throughout his whole body. A third Severance Grand Elder did not even have the slightest ability to resist in front of Ling Han. This was something that only a fourth Severance Grand Elder could accomplish. My gods! Second Severance. Ding Song finally managed to see through Ling Han's cultivation level, or rather, he had finally noticed. Even his lips were trembling. This was unimaginable. He had clearly just advanced into the first Severance, and only a few days had passed since then, and he was already in the second Severance? Monster. An absolute monster. How did their Ding clan become enemies with this kind of monster? At this moment, Ding Song finally felt regret. Why had they coveted the Hu clan's celestial technique, which eventually led to the Hu clan being completely wiped out all those years ago? What he regretted even further was why hadn't they made sure that the Hu clan was completely eliminated? And the consequence was that so many years after the event, a monster the likes of Ling Han had emerged in vengeance. Let him go. Though he was covered completely in cold sweat, he still forced himself to look calm. Ling Han shook his head and asked with a grin, "Are you an idiot?" Ding Song also knew that Ling Han would not let him go, but what other words did he have to say? Let him go, and all your grudges with the Ding clan will be cleared from now onwards, he forced out through gritted teeth. When he said these words, his heart felt suffocated and filled with fury, but what else could he do? Even a young soul elite could only watch helplessly as Ling Han escaped, and this brat's rate of advancement was so exaggerating. If they didn't clear their debts, the Ding clan would really be finished. As long as it did not involve another 3-star force or 2-star force, the Fu clan and the Black Moon sect would not care about the survival of Dark Moon City's factions, because no matter how much they fought amongst themselves, Dark Moon City would still be under the rule of the Fu clan and the Black Moon sect. Thus, the Ding clan could not possibly ask for protection from the Black Moon sect and the Fu clan. A third Severance Grand Elder had been produced through the expenditure of who knew how many resources, and a considerable number of first Severance Grand Elders of the Ding clan had already died. They really couldn't afford further loss. Cleared. Ling Han broke into surprised laughter in spite of himself. These people of the Ding clan were really living in their own world. Could it be that they thought that they were the true victims in this matter? The Hu clan had been wiped out, and it was to be considered cleared just like that? He had been targeted repeatedly by the Ding clan, and it was to be cleared like that? The Ding clan had refined such an evil object like the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, and they wanted this to be cleared? Cleared your sister. Ling Han laughed loudly, both hands gripping Ding Shan's head, then with a twist, ka, the sound of bones cracking as crisp as frying beans resounded. Then, he threw Ding Shan over to Ding Song. Ding Shan's body skidded 9 to 12 meters on the ground, just managing to stop in front of the Ding Song's toes. He died. There was no need for Ding Song to examine closely, and he already knew that Ding Shan was already a fully dead man whose spirit had even been eliminated. His whole body was trembling, partly because of fury, but more so because of terror. When had it been that a minor character that was only an ant in his eyes actually possessed the strength to easily kill him? His life or death was no longer within his control, and this emotion was too terrifying. Grand Elder Ding Song. A few more people had arrived, and they were all first Severance Grand Elders and second Severance Grand Elders of the Ding clan. Because there was no longer any need to seek Ling Han, they had naturally all returned. They had only been one step late, yet discovered much to their shock that Ding Shan had died. A third Severance Grand Elder actually died in such a calm way. There was no battle that shook the mountains and caused an earthquake. It was as if only a nameless foot soldier like a cat or dog had died. Grand Elder! They all exclaimed in shock, feeling as if the heavens themselves were falling down on them. Where is Ding Yaolong? If he still doesn't come out, your Ding clan is going to die without any descendants left behind. With a thought from Ling Han, the 3 battle beasts leaped out of his body, beginning a grand massacre. All of a sudden, the Ding clan manor was drowned out in terrible screams. Chapter 1764, Everything Has Its Vanquisher. Chapter 1764, Everything Has Its Vanquisher. The 10 Beasts technique was a Celestial King tier secret technique, and the 3 battle beasts were more so imbued with source powers such as the 9 Heavens Flame and the Shining Source Water. Although the battle beast which was imbued with the power of lightning was slightly weaker, it could still rival ordinary 3rd Severance Grand Elders, who could block these 3 devastating battle beasts. The Ding clan was instantly transformed into a sea of destruction and blood. Cries of misery and agony echoed throughout the entire city. The Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan immediately arrived in the surroundings. In fact, even Mao Dai had come. However, these 3 elites only observed the battle in the distance, and they didn't show any signs of interfering. Moreover, they were all wearing expressions of shock and disbelief. Ling Han's battle prowess was incredible. The Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan were still confident that they could suppress Ling Han. However, after pondering over this question for a while, Mao Dai resolutely shook his head. If he were to battle against Ling Han, he would have no confidence that he could achieve a certain victory. Anyhow, the current situation was quite strange. Mao Dai, as well as the Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan, had all been attracted here by the commotion. However, where was Ding Yaolong? He was still hiding in some unknown corner. Was he afraid of Ling Han? This naturally couldn't be the case. He was at the peak stage of the 4th Severance, and he was also a supremely talented elite. Thus, he definitely possessed the ability to suppress Ling Han at this moment. Something felt off, so there was definitely more to the current situation than met the eye. Ling Han was also keeping alert against any sudden changes. In any case, the current massacre didn't need much of his attention anyway. The 3 battle beasts were seemingly invincible as they continued to wantonly wreak havoc. Evil brat! When only less than 1/10 of the Ding clan remained, a loud and furious roar suddenly boomed through the sky. Ding Yaolong had finally appeared. Ancestor! The remaining members of the Ding clan exclaimed in excitement. Ding Yaolong was the backbone of the Ding clan, and he was also the symbol of might and invincibility. Even if the entire Ding clan were massacred, it would still be eventually rebuilt as long as Ding Yaolong remained. Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly astonished as he turned around to look at Ding Yaolong. This was because Ding Yaolong's hair was completely white, and his face was also full of wrinkles. He looked so old that Ling Han could barely recognize him. One had to realize that Ding Yaolong was a prodigy among prodigies. He had severed the mundane at an extremely young age, and he had only looked to be around 30 years old at that time. He had been tall and sturdy, and he had also been brimming with vitality and vigor. Now, however, he looked like a frail old man. He had transformed far too much. Die! Ding Yaolong roared as he charged at Ling Han. He then immediately launched an attack without saying anything else. Wong! He summoned his bell of 10,000 ghosts. Boom! A boundless, ice-cold aura swept forth, and this was accompanied by the shrill wails of 10,000 ghosts. This attack was enough to make one go numb with apprehension, and it was enough to make one's divine sense leave their body. The bell of 10,000 ghosts had actually become even stronger. Ling Han finally understood why Ding Yaolong hadn't appeared earlier. He also understood why Ding Yaolong had transformed into this ghost-like state. As it turned out, he had been strengthening his bell of 10,000 ghosts. Regarding the specifics of how he had achieved this, Ling Han didn't know. He wasn't interested in finding out either. Presumably, it required a sacrifice of one's life force and energy, and it was because of this that Ding Yaolong had ended up in such a miserable state. There was one thing that Ling Han could confirm, though. The current bell of 10,000 ghosts was incredibly terrifying. The shrill wails of 10,000 ghosts surged toward Ling Han. Initially, the cultivation level of these vengeful ghosts had only been around the early stage of the 3rd Severance. Now, however, their cultivation level had already reached the peak stage of the 3rd Severance. If only 1 or 2 of the ghosts had achieved this rise in cultivation level, it naturally wouldn't have been any problem at all. However, as its name suggested, the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts held a profound number of vengeful ghosts. 10,000 ghosts had achieved this sudden rise in cultivation level. This was a genuinely terrifying notion. Ling Han was being surrounded and attacked by a profound number of vengeful ghosts at the peak stage of the third severance, and each of these vengeful ghosts was completely fearless and even undying. Just how terrifying was this? At the very least, Mao Dai and the Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan were feeling so apprehensive that their hair had already stood on ends. They immediately shot back in retreat, moving dozens of kilometers into the distance. This was to avoid being swept up in the suffusing black mists. Large numbers of vengeful ghosts were appearing from that expanse of black mist, and they would definitely struggle to protect themselves if they were caught anywhere near it. However, Ling Han simply smiled upon seeing this attack. In the cultivation world, quantitative changes would often lead to qualitative changes. This was the case with the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, which could release 10,000 vengeful ghosts to attack its target. Even 4th Severance Grand Elders would struggle to withstand this attack. However, Ling Han had also experienced a qualitative change of his own. This qualitative change had resulted from him advancing from the first severance to the second severance. His godly bones had become tougher, and they had genuinely risen to the level of 2-star divine metal. What did this signify? This signified that even 4th Severance Grand Elders would need to attack him several times if they wanted to wound him. That being the case, how could Ling Han be afraid of 3rd Severance vengeful ghosts? Would it make a difference even if they were at the peak stage of the 3rd Severance? Everything had its Vanquisher. Right now, the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts was nothing but trash in Ling Han's eyes. Ling Han wrapped one of his arms around the Empress' waist, and he wrapped his other arm around the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's waist. He then confidently strode forward. After all, how could the vengeful ghosts near him? If they weren't incinerated by the 9 heavens flame, then they would be transformed into ice statues by the Shinin source water. Pooh! Mao Dai and the Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan all gasped in shock upon seeing Ling Han casually stride forward. Their mouths hung so wide open that even an egg could be stuffed inside. This was unbelievable. This was far too fucking unbelievable. Even 4th Severance Grand Elders could only kneel down and submit to Ling Han's incredible battle prowess. Impossible! Ding Yaolong exclaimed in shock. His eyes were wide with puzzlement and disbelief. He had exhausted his life force, and even transformed himself into this miserable state in order to increase the power of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Yet, it was still completely ineffective against Ling Han? This was far too crushing. This was simply unfathomable. Trying to astonish a 4th Severance Grand Elder was an incredibly difficult task. However, Ling Han had done so with ease. Moreover, he had astonished not 1/4 Severance Grand Elder, but 3. Of course, he had also astonished that 3rd Severance Grand Elder. Nothing is impossible. Effort is the decisive factor, Ling Han said. He waved his hand, unleashing an orb of flashing lightning that exploded in the air. Pong! There was a deafening boom, and most of the black mist was instantly dissipated into nothingness. Along with it, hundreds of vengeful ghosts were also blasted into smithereens. Cracking light sphere. This was a large area of effect attack, and its effects were astonishingly good for the current situation. This was because the vengeful ghosts were only at the peak stage of the 3rd severance, and Ling Han just happened to be powerful enough to kill such beings. Each explosion could kill a large swathe of vengeful ghosts, and it was as if Ling Han were mowing through weeds. Ding Yaolong couldn't help but shudder. These vengeful ghosts were summoned by the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, so they weren't genuine corporeal beings. Thus, there would be no concept of life and death. In turn, it wouldn't matter if they were obliterated and destroyed. After all, the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts could simply summon more. However, the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts would consume a portion of power each time it summoned a vengeful ghost. If too much power was consumed, it would eventually fall into a slumber. At that time, Ding Yaolong would need to sacrifice his blood and life force to awaken it again. How can this be? How can this be? Ling Han continued to unleash cracking light spheres toward the swarm of vengeful ghosts. Even though the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts could continue to summon vengeful ghosts, the rate at which it did so was nowhere near the rate at which Ling Han was destroying them. Thus, the number of vengeful ghosts instantly started to decrease at a rapid rate. In the beginning, there had been 10,000 vengeful ghosts. Now, however, there was only a small number of sparsely located vengeful ghosts. At this moment, they posed absolutely no threat to Ling Han. The Grand Elders of the Long Clan and the Duan Clan exchanged a glance before immediately attacking in unison. They were going to seize this opportunity to eliminate their rival. Killing Ding Yaolong was not only to eliminate the problem of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. With his death, the resources of the Ding clan would also become the resources of the Long Clan and the Duan Clan. This was a huge and mouth-watering amount of wealth. This was their best opportunity, so how could they not seize it with both hands? The two elites immediately teamed up, launching a wave of furious attacks at Ding Yaolong. The Ding clan was facing an existential crisis. Chapter 1765, Annihilating the Ding Clan. Chapter 1765, Annihilating the Ding Clan. With his hands freed, Ling Han started to chase after and attack Ding Song and the other severing mundane tier Grand Elders. Who could escape from his lightning? Meanwhile, the Empress also summoned her 9 clones, each of which was a king tier among king tiers at the second severance. Moreover, since Ding Song had already been targeted by Ling Han, who else could rival her and her clones? Mao Dai hesitated for a moment before also resolutely joining the battle. With so many elites ganging up to attack them, the Ding clan was now facing an overwhelming existential crisis. This was their karma. In the past, the Ding clan had tricked the Hu clan and borrowed the power of Celestial King forces to annihilate the Hu clan. To say nothing of the Black Moon sect, even the Fu clan hadn't dared to say anything about this. Now, however, they were facing the heavy consequences. Grand Elder, Ancestor, damn it! The members of the Ding clan were all screaming in shock and fury. Almost none of them surrendered, and many of them chose to resist until the very end. However, how could they rival the power of 3rd Severance and 4th Severance Grand Elders? Apart from Ding Yaolong, the rest of the Ding clan was completely and thoroughly massacred. However, if they didn't kill Ding Yaolong, he would eventually flee with his Bell of 10,000 Ghosts and create another Ding clan elsewhere. Thus, Ding Yaolong had to die, and the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts had to be destroyed. The Grand Elders from the Long Clan and the Duan Clan started to unleash increasingly powerful and furious attacks. Things had already come to this, so there was already no path of retreat. They had to carry through to the end and resolutely kill Ding Yaolong. Old geezers, you're seeking death, Ding Yaolong roared. There was a murderous gleam in his eyes, and he continued, after I flee, I'll definitely take the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts for a stroll around your clans. I'll let you experience the feeling of losing your entire clan. In your dreams, Ling Han roared as he charged over. He activated his immovable deity metal body, and he unleashed powerful celestial techniques from each of his 6 hands. His battle prowess rose by a whopping 10-fold. At this moment, his battle prowess could roughly rival that of elites at the early stage of the 4th Severance. Although he was still too weak to rival those at the peak stage of the 4th Severance, his powerful physique meant that he wouldn't be easily defeated by them, either. With Ling Han's help, the pressure on the Grand Elders from the Long Clan and the Duan Clan instantly decreased by a significant amount. Why was Ling Han participating in this battle? If Ding Yaolong unleashed a sacrificial technique to kill both himself and his opponents, Ling Han would resolutely step forward to block his attack. Moreover, he would be completely unscathed at that time. What was the most frightening thing when battling against those at the same cultivation level? Was it not sacrificial techniques that could kill both the host and their opponents? To say nothing of battling 2 against 1, even if it were a battle of 10 against 1, the single person might still be able to kill one of their opponents if they unleashed a sacrificial technique. After all, which of those at the severing mundane tier wasn't a prodigy among prodigies? However, with Ling Han's participation, Ding Yaolong was stripped of the right to even unleash such a sacrificial technique. That being the case, the elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan instantly felt much more at ease. At the same time, they could also unleash their powerful attacks with more confidence. On the contrary, Ding Yaolong was feeling extremely frustrated and stifled. He had already been facing immense pressure when fighting against the two Grand Elders who were at the same cultivation level as him. Although Ling Han was slightly weaker than them, with only a battle prowess at the early stage of the fourth severance, Ding Yaolong still wasn't able to completely ignore his attacks. How is this brat's defensive ability so powerful? Ding Yaolong was on the verge of tears. He had even been stripped of the right to unleash a sacrificial attack. How vexing would it be if he were to die here today? Aya! He roared in fury and indignance. He was the only remaining member of the Ding clan, and he had already been pushed into a corner of despair. In fact, he couldn't even sacrifice his life to kill his opponents. This caused him to almost explode with rage and frustration. Commit fewer evils in your next life, Ling Han said coldly. He unleashed his Tide of the Ages, completely shattering Ding Yaolong's secret technique of time. This was an extremely powerful secret technique that pertained to the power of time. In fact, with the protection of this secret technique, Ding Yaolong could even gain the ability to fight against two Grand Elders at the same cultivation level as him. However, you've already committed far too many evils in this lifetime, so you won't have an opportunity to be reborn as a human in your next life. Brat, I'll kill you even if it means death. Ding Yaolong howled. His eyes were bloodshot as he furiously lunged at Ling Han. Ling Han snickered upon hearing this. Even if he didn't channel his indestructible heaven scroll, Ding Yaolong would still need to use the power of regulations to slowly refine him to death. Ding Yaolong definitely wouldn't be able to kill him using brute strength. That being the case, how could Ding Yaolong kill him? In any case, he still had the indestructible true fluid. Thus, even if he were truly killed, he could still rise from the ashes and revive. Ding Yaolong would definitely be terrified to death if he learned of this. Old bastard, go die! Ling Han shouted as he exchanged blows with Ding Yaolong. Although he was sent flying time and time again, he would always use lightning flash to immediately charge over again. Ding Yaolong was completely obstructed by him. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan seized this opportunity to furiously attack Ding Yaolong. If they couldn't kill him while holding such an overwhelming advantage, they would be absolute embarrassments of Fourth Severance Grand Elders. If that were the case, they might as well find a slab of tofu to slap themselves to death. Ding Yaolong was riddled with wounds that were becoming more and more severe. However, he was being surrounded and attacked by three great elites, so he couldn't even find an opportunity to escape and flee. He could only fight to the death. Yet, fighting to the death would be completely meaningless. After all, Ling Han was an absolute freak who could even block his sacrificial attacks. Upon thinking of this, Ding Yaolong felt so frustrated that he almost spat a mouthful of blood. Pong, pong, pong. Dozens of attacks from the Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan slammed into Ding Yaolong's back, causing him to vomit blood and stumble back in retreat. However, this also caused him to become increasingly wild and furious as he charged after Ling Han. He refused to believe that Ling Han's defenses were invincible. However, he was destined to be disappointed. He was being relentlessly attacked, and this caused his battle prowess to be greatly affected. After all, he had already expended a huge amount of his life force and energy to increase the power of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Thus, how could he unleash any more power? In fact, Ding Yaolong would violently spit a mouthful of blood with each attack that he launched. He naturally couldn't withstand this kind of expenditure, regardless of how much blood he had. Thus, after reaching a certain limit, his aura instantly started to fall significantly. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan were ecstatic upon seeing this. From today onward, there would be no more Ding clan. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Ding Yaolong threw his head back and roared in fury. His chest was already shattered, and blood was violently spurting from his heart. His vitality was also rapidly draining away. However, there was still anger and indignance in his wide-open eyes. A grand elite at the peak stage of the fourth severance was killed just like that. Ling Han threw another punch, unleashing his 9 heavens flame to incinerate the bell of 10,000 ghosts. Shrill wails echoed through the air, and numerous projections of vengeful ghosts rose from the bell of 10,000 ghosts. This was the final struggle of the evil weapon. However, without the power of its master, and due to its huge expenditure from before, the struggle of the 10,000 ghosts seemed extremely frail and listless. It wasn't long before the numerous formation patterns on its surface were refined and erased. These formation patterns were the reason that it had become an evil weapon. Ling Han then retrieved his divine demon sword to slash at the bell of 10,000 ghosts, absorbing the godly metal essence that was contained within this evil weapon. If he hadn't erased the formation patterns first, the divine demon sword wouldn't have been able to absorb the godly metal essence from the bell of 10,000 ghosts. This was because the bell of 10,000 ghosts would have instinctively counterattacked. Moreover, the divine demon sword was currently unable to defeat this evil weapon. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan silently observed this scene. Only when the bell of 10,000 ghosts was comprehensively destroyed did they calmly nod, finally at ease. This evil weapon was far too threatening to them. Ling Han also nodded at the 2 Grand Elders in acknowledgement before casually leaving the scene. With his current power, he naturally didn't need to lower his head before these 2 Grand Elders. He had clearly displayed his power in the battle just then. However, Ling Han didn't leave Dark Moon City. The resources of the Ding clan were a huge slice of cake, so he naturally wouldn't leave it to the others. If the Long clan and the Duan clan split the territory of the Ding clan but didn't give him any benefits, if that were the case, their eyes must have been clouded by greed. Sure enough, the 2 Grand Elders personally came to visit him after a few days. After some polite chatter, they handed Ling Han a spatial god tool. Ling Han inspected its contents on the spot, and a satisfied smile immediately spread across his face. Chapter 1766, Separation Resentment City. Chapter 1766, Separation Resentment City. Ling Han headed toward Separation Resentment City with Mao Dai. Separation Resentment City was where the Fu clan was located, and Mao Dai had initially planned on joining the Fu clan after reaching the 4th severance. However, after witnessing Ling Han's incredible power, he didn't have any interest in remaining in Dark Moon City anymore. He wanted to join the Fu clan as soon as possible so that he could continue to grow stronger. If one didn't have a flying treasure, then the fastest way to travel around the celestial realm would be by ship. After all, transfer formations were far too expensive and far too difficult to construct. Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. As it turned out, the large black dog could also be viewed as a talented dog. Anyhow, he would leave the people from the Great Ling Empire in this smaller city of the Black Moon sect. He couldn't look after them forever, so now was a good time for them to gain independence and learn to live by themselves. This was the celestial realm, and there was no such thing as heaven or hell in this realm. Do they truly not exist? Ling Han asked Small Tower. Most definitely not. Small Tower answered with absolute certainty. At this moment, Ling Han was filled with great anticipation. After arriving at the Fu clan, he could start to ask around for the Rock Palace's whereabouts. At that time, he would then be able to set off and look for his friends. After sailing for almost a year, the ship finally arrived at Separation Resentment City. This was an unfathomably large 3-star city that was divided into 4 regions: Heaven Departing City, Separation Reluctant City, Great King City, and Minor King City. Heaven Departing City was the city of the highest level, and only the Fu clan and their subordinate forces were allowed to reside in it. Separation Reluctant City also housed the subordinate forces of the Fu clan, but these forces were far weaker than those in Heaven Departing City. Moreover, their relationship with the Fu clan was also relatively inferior. Meanwhile, Great King City and Minor King City both housed ordinary residents. However, Great King City was slightly higher in level. After all, ordinary residents were also divided into different social classes. Mao Dai was followed by Zhang Chong and Mao Shuyu, while Ling Han was accompanied by the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. The 6 of them settled down in Minor King City before sending someone to report their arrival. Of the 4 cities, only Minor King City could be entered with a payment of star stones. Meanwhile, the 3 other cities all required explicit permission before one could enter. If one were to enter without permission, the guards of the Fu clan weren't standing around for show. After waiting for a few days, Ling Han and the others finally received permission to enter Heaven Departing City. The 4 cities of Separation Resentment City were organized in a top-down manner, with Heaven Departing City naturally situated at the topmost location. In fact, one would need to enter a transfer formation to reach this city. Because the distance wasn't too great, the cost of constructing and maintaining this transfer formation was also relatively acceptable. Otherwise, perhaps only Celestial King tier forces would be able to shoulder the costs of maintaining a transfer formation between 2 3-star cities. After arriving here, Mao Dai bade farewell to Ling Han. Although Mao Dai was a prodigy, he was far inferior when compared to Ling Han. Thus, the 2 of them received extremely different treatment when being recruited by the Fu clan. One day later, Fu Gaoyun excitedly ran over to visit Ling Han. "Brother Ling, you've finally come." He immediately rushed over to give Ling Han a friendly and enthusiastic hug. Ling Han smiled upon seeing Fu Gaoyun. He was an extremely enthusiastic person, and this was in stark contrast to those who were less skilled in expressing themselves. A good example of this was the Empress, who would definitely kill any stranger who dared to embrace her. Anyhow, Fu Gaoyun hadn't let Ling Han down, and he had helped him purchase a huge amount of godly metal. Meanwhile, Ling Han had also seen a huge increase in his wealth recently. In fact, he had obtained almost half of the Ding clan's accumulated wealth. Why half? This was because he had left Dark Moon City, meaning that he couldn't obtain the Ding clan's fixed assets. For example, he couldn't obtain the Ding clan's precious mines. As such, the Long clan and the Duan clan had given him most of the liquid assets. That being the case, Ling Han had almost 100 million star stones at this moment. Judging from this, one could also see just how wealthy these powerful forces were. Moreover, the Ding clan was only a severing mundane tier clan. Ling Han was about to repay Fu Gaoyun with star stones, yet Fu Gaoyun didn't care about this at all. After all, he had bought the godly metal on credit. As the future clan leader of the Fu clan, who dared to press him for repayment, "Brother, if you still didn't come, Elder Yin would soon explode," Fu Gaoyun said. This was another reason why he had rushed over so quickly. He needed to take Ling Han to visit Xiang Yin as soon as possible. Otherwise, this great alchemist might directly wreak havoc in the Fu clan. Ling Han laughed heartily upon hearing this, and he followed Fu Gaoyun to visit Xiang Yin. He naturally brought his newly received spatial god tool to the Fu clan as well, and after passing through a stone gate, he arrived before a courtyard. Upon entering this courtyard, he saw that in addition to Xiang Yin, there was also a white-haired elder as well as a beautiful young woman. This woman was truly beautiful. She had a slender body, smooth and jade-like skin, and glossy raven-black hair. However, Fu Gaoyun immediately grimaced upon seeing this young woman. It was as if he wanted to immediately turn around and leave. "Hey, little Yun Yun," the beautiful young woman exclaimed upon seeing Fu Gaoyun. She wasn't reserved at all, and she seemed even bolder and more straightforward than men. "Why do you always run away when you see me? It's not like I'll stick a rod through your A*S or anything." Upon hearing this, Ling Han immediately understood why Fu Gaoyun was wearing such a sulky expression. This young woman was far too bold. The white-haired elder shook with anger and shouted, "Young lady, why don't you act like a proper woman at all?" He was Situ Tang, and he had finally come to visit today after being pressed by Xiang Yin several times. Meanwhile, that bold young woman was his only granddaughter. She was called Situ Xiaojun, and because her parents had died early, she was Situ Tang's only remaining relative. As such, she was extremely spoiled and pampered by him. However, it was also because of this that she had grown to become the bold woman that she was today. This frustrated him to no end. Situ Xiaojun replied with a simple "aha." She didn't dare to publicly retort her grandpa. However, Even though she obediently listened to his critiques, she would never end up changing her ways. Fu Gaoyun stepped forward and respectfully bowed to the two great alchemists. My respects to Elder Yin and Elder Tang. These were the two most high-ranking alchemists of the Fu clan, and they were also the greatest assets of the Fu clan. Thus, they deserved the respect of everyone in the Fu clan. The two alchemists replied with a smile. Xiang Yin then grinned widely as he walked up to Ling Han, saying, "Brat, you've finally come. Come over here. Let me see if your alchemy has improved or not." "Old geezer Yin, why did you drag me over here?" Situ Ting said in irritation. "I'm extremely busy, and I don't have time to **t around with you." Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. He finally understood where Situ Xiaojun had learned her habits from. Meanwhile, Situ Xiaojun was glancing at Ling Han in curiosity. She had seen Xiang Yin many times, yet she had never seen him acting so warm and friendly with anyone before. Xiang Yin humphed before disdainfully saying, "Old geezer Tang, I suggest that you stop wasting your time on the winds and fires 9 clouds pill." "What? You dare to say that I'm wasting my time?" Situ Tang immediately jumped up, continuing, "You're the one wasting your time. Your entire family is wasting their time. Just you wait. I'll definitely refine the winds and fires 9 clouds pill in under 10,000 years. Heh. Xiang Yin chuckled coldly as he tossed a vial towards Situ Tang. He was wearing an apathetic expression, yet he was already jumping around and dancing in joy in his mind. Situ Tang instinctively caught the vial, and he irritatedly asked, "What's this for?" "Open it and see for yourself," Xiang Yin replied with a wave of his hand. "How pretentious," Situ Tang said with a scoff. He casually opened the vial, yet his expression instantly underwent a drastic change. This was because he could already smell the fragrance of the alchemical pill. He shuddered upon smelling this, and he immediately exclaimed, "Winds and fires 9 clouds pill." Chapter 1767, Bold Woman. Chapter 1767, Bold Woman. "Heh, it's nothing, Xiang Yin purposefully said. He was wearing a fake expression of calm and modesty, as if he didn't want to be congratulated. Meanwhile, Situ Tang was completely stunned. He poured the alchemical pill out before carefully examining and smelling it. His expression became increasingly fervent, and even his beard was starting to shudder. He had already spent billions of years to perfect the ancient pill recipe for the winds and fires 9 clouds pill. In fact, he had even engaged in numerous arguments with Xiang Yin over the direction of the pill recipe. It was also because of this that they had become opponents and adversaries. He had been extremely confident that he was correct, and he had also been certain that he could definitely succeed in refining the alchemical pill at some point in time. However, who would have thought that his opponent would succeed in refining it before him? "Huh? Grandpa Yin, you truly succeeded?" Situ Xiaojun asked. She wasn't shocked by this sudden turn of events. "Of course. How can your grandpa compare to me?" Xiang Yin replied smugly. This was only a friendly competition between him and Situ Tang, and the relationship between them was actually extremely deep. Thus, he treated Situ Xiaojun as if she were his own granddaughter. Situ Xiaojun raised her thumb and said, "Grandpa Yin, you're so talented." Situ Tang looked at Xiang Yin as he finally came to his senses and asked, "Why you genuinely succeeded?" "It's naturally because I chose the correct method. Moreover, my alchemy skills are far superior to yours, so I was able to easily refine this pill," Xiang Yin said without any sense of shame. If it weren't for Ling Han's help, he would have definitely still been stumbling around like a headless chook. Situ Tang naturally didn't believe him. After all, he understood Xiang Yin better than Xiang Yin understood himself. The reverse was also true. Under his relentless interrogation, Xiang Yin had no option but to spit out the truth. Situ Tang looked Ling Han up and down. After a while, he said, "Brat, why don't you become my disciple?" "Piss off. I found him first." Xiang Yin immediately said, "T. Your sh*tty skills will only hold him back. It's naturally better if he becomes my disciple." Situ Tang said with a scoff. Just a single hand of mine is more powerful than you. Just a single finger of mine is more powerful than you, Xiangyan said, unwilling to back down. Just a single fingernail of mine is more powerful than you. Just a single hair of mine is more powerful than you. The two elders glared at each other, and it was as if they were about to break into a fight. They didn't possess the reservedness and dignified aura of great alchemists at all. Let's go. These two old geezers are arguing with each other again. It'll be a dozen or so days before they finally stop. Situ Xiaojin clapped her hands and continued, hurry up and leave. What are you still standing there in a daze for? Is your A*S feeling itchy? Ling Han glanced at Fu Gaoyun, and Fu Gaoyun also glanced at him. This young woman was even bolder and more vulgar than men. They left the courtyard, and it wasn't long before they heard a series of banging and clanging sounds. It was clear that the two elders had already started fighting. It's not like you have 3 heads and 6 arms or anything, so why are you so adored by those two old geezers? Situ Xiaojin asked in curiosity. She was wearing the expression of a pervert, and she looked him up and down as if he were a beautiful woman. Perhaps you have some extraordinary talent? She turned her gaze toward Ling Han's lower body, and it was as if her gaze possessed little hands that were also observing him. Ling Han almost raised his leg to kick her away. This woman had definitely reincarnated into the wrong body. Brother Fu, didn't you say we were going somewhere just then? He suddenly said. Yeah, that's right. Fu Gaoyun hurriedly clapped his hands and said, I almost forgot about that. Anyway, let's go. The two of them hurriedly turned around to flee. You're trying to ditch me? Situ Xiaojin said with a snicker. As she said this, she immediately started to chase after them. However, she couldn't keep up with Ling Han and Fu Gaoyun's speed, so it wasn't long before she completely lost track of them. She stopped in irritation, and she murmured, This city is only so large, and there's no way you can run to the heavens. I'll find you two sooner or later. Fu Gaoyun stopped and said, Brother Ling, starting from tomorrow, you and your wife can both enter the Heavenly Dragon Academy. What Heavenly Dragon Academy? It's an academy founded by the Fu clan. Apart from members of the Fu clan, this academy also educates the members of some nearby clans. In addition, it also recruits prodigies from other cities, Fu Gaoyun explained. For example, Black Moon City's Changsun Liang. However, because the lowest requirement for recruitment is reaching the severing mundane tier, Changsun Liang wasn't able to enter in the beginning. Otherwise, he would have been recruited to the academy long ago. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then asked, What about my other wife? Fu Gaoyun patted his chest and said, Heh, we naturally have to open the back door for you. Sister Heavenly Phoenix will be enrolled as if she were a member of the Fu clan. She'll definitely reach the severing mundane in under 100 million years. The Fu clan held Ling Han in such high regard not only because of his cultivation talent, but also because of Xiang Yan's adoration toward him. Otherwise, how could the Fu clan break their own rules for a measly severing mundane tier prodigy, reaching the severing mundane tier in under 100 million years? This wasn't slow. In fact, it could even be regarded as astonishingly quick. However, Ling Han didn't want the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to perform a normal severance. Otherwise, she could only sever her own mundane relationships. Severing heaven and earth would be far too difficult for her. Perhaps there exists some supreme celestial medicine or celestial pill that can help her sever heaven and earth. Ling Han trusted his own alchemy skills. It didn't matter too much if he couldn't refine such a pill now would eventually be able to refine it. Perhaps he would succeed in doing so when he became a celestial king. Fu Gaoyun waved goodbye. Ling Han retrieved the huge amount of godly metal to feed the divine demon sword, and when all of this godly metal was transformed into scrap metal, the divine demon sword finally advanced to the level of 2-star pseudo-divine metal. Pseudo-divine metal was divided into 10 ranks, and those above the highest rank could be regarded as genuine divine metal. I've almost consumed 2/3 of my wealth. Moreover, it's already so expensive now, so how expensive will it be when I want to raise the divine demon sword to the level of 7-star pseudo-divine metal or 8-star pseudo-divine metal? Ling Han was slightly worried upon thinking of this. At that time, he would need to spend an astronomical amount of star stones. Whatever, that's a problem for the future. As I become more powerful, obtaining wealth should also become easier and easier. The next day, Ling Han set off for the Heavenly Dragon Academy with the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. In order to avoid trouble, the Empress had already concealed her true appearance. However, she was slightly unhappy about this because she was unable to show her beauty to Ling Han at all times. After walking for a while, they arrived at their destination. The Heavenly Dragon Academy was incredibly large. 3-star cities were at least 10 times the size of 2-star cities. Although this city was divided into 4 smaller regions, and although this academy only occupied one corner of Heaven Departing City, the Heavenly Dragon Academy was still as large as the entire Dark Moon City. There were tall mountains in the academy, and there were also large seashores in the academy. The Heavenly Dragon Academy was like a huge, standalone city. The gate of the academy was comparatively small, with the 2 gate pillars only measuring 300 meters in height. Moreover, there was only a gate lintel, and there wasn't actually a physical gate door. The pillars were engraved with coiling heavenly dragons, and these dragons looked extremely lively and realistic. Their mouths were also wide open and roaring in fury, and this would make one feel a sense of intense might and pressure. Although there was no physical gate door, this didn't mean that any random person could enter the academy. This was because there existed a formation that blocked anyone who didn't possess the relevant talismans from entering. During his visit yesterday, Fu Gaoyun had already given Ling Han 3 talismans to enter. At this moment, there was seemingly some argument going on before the gate. Ling Han looked over, only to see Mao Dai furiously arguing with a young man. His eyes were burning with anger. Crawl through my legs or fuck off. Chapter 1768, Humiliation. Chapter 1768, Humiliation. This was an extremely arrogant young man, and he was blocking Mao Dai's path into the Heavenly Dragon Academy. If Mao Dai wanted to enter, he would have to crawl through this young man's legs. However, who was Mao Dai? He was a prodigy, and he was a 3rd Severance Grand Elder. So, how could he endure such humiliation? However, this was the Fu clan's territory, and Mao Dai had only just arrived here. Thus, he couldn't rashly engage in battle. As such, he could only use reason to try to talk his way through. As long as he could resolve this with words, he definitely wouldn't engage in physical battle. Sir, have I offended you in any way? Mao Dai asked in a solemn voice. Because he was entering the academy, he was by himself at this moment. Otherwise, as young and energetic as Zhang Chong and Mao Shuyu were, they would have definitely exploded in anger already. Ha 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 ha. The young man laughed wantonly, and there was an expression of disdain on his face. Is trash like you worthy of offending me? Mao Dai was even more enraged upon hearing this. However, he forcefully suppressed his anger and said, Then why are you making things difficult for me? The young man raised his chin and said, Because I want to. His expression was filled with provocation and arrogance. Upon hearing that, Mao Dai abandoned all hope of resolving this peacefully. This young man was definitely targeting him on purpose. With this in mind, he immediately roared, Excuse me. His right hand shot forward, grabbing at the young man's wrist. He was going to toss this young man behind him. Naive, the young man said with a sneer. He also replied with an attack of his own. Wong. A ball of flames instantly burst to life in his palm. However, looking closely, this ball of flames was completely different from ordinary flames. It looked like a ball of ghostly flames, and it radiated with an extremely terrifying and chilling aura. Mao Dai didn't wait for this attack to hit him, and he immediately stopped his attack before leaping back in retreat. He was as quick and nimble as a rabbit. Still trying to escape, the young man said with a snicker. His hand continued to rapidly shoot at Mao Dai. 4th Severance. Ling Han was slightly astonished upon seeing this. After one reached the Severing Mundane tier, it would be extremely difficult to determine their specific cultivation level if they didn't release their aura. For example, A fourth Severance Grand Elder would only be able to determine that a first Severance Grand Elder was weaker than them. However, they wouldn't be able to determine by how much. Of course, a Dividing Soul tier cultivator would naturally be able to determine the specific cultivation level of a Severing Mundane tier cultivator. However, this was relatively meaningless during battle. After all, Dividing Soul tier cultivators could easily crush Severing Mundane tier cultivators. As such, what did it matter whether they were at the first Severance or fourth Severance? Anyhow, this young was actually at the fourth Severance. His appearance wasn't old, so it was clear that he had severed the mundane at a relatively young age. Moreover, because those at the Severing Mundane tier possessed an infinite lifespan, their appearance naturally wouldn't undergo any change. In any case, advancing from the first Severance to the fourth Severance was no easier than advancing from the Genesis tier to the Severing Mundane tier. This young man looked like a profligate, yet this was only his external appearance. He had advanced to the Severing Mundane tier, so could he be a genuine fool? After gaining the upper hand, the young man continued to bear down on Mao Dai. Mao Dai continued to dash around, and it was clear that he had severely underestimated the young man's strength. At this moment, he had already fallen into a huge disadvantage. He was completely unable to break free from the young man's grasp no matter what he did. This was the overwhelming advantage that fourth Severance elites possessed over third Severance elites. Fortunately, Mao Dai had performed flawless severances. Even though he couldn't be regarded as a king tier, the young man before him was only an elite who had performed normal severances. That being the case, Mao Dai was only stuck at a huge disadvantage. He wouldn't be defeated anytime soon. After retreating for a while, Mao Dai finally found an opportunity to break free from his disadvantage. He then unleashed his aura and started to battle against the young man. Ling Han observed them for a brief moment before shaking his head. Although Mao Dai had performed flawless severances, he was still one severance weaker than his opponent. In other words, there was a huge gulf between their battle prowess, and it was likely that Mao Dai would fall into a disadvantage again after 100 or so exchanges. After 1,000 or so exchanges, it was likely that he would be comprehensively defeated. Of course, the situation would become more uncertain if Mao Dai unleashed some powerful trump card. "I've underestimated you," the young man said in astonishment. As a fourth Severance elite, he had initially thought that he could defeat Mao Dai in just a few simple exchanges. However, there was an unexpectedly huge gulf between those who had performed flawless severances and those who had performed normal severances. Thus, he was still unable to fully suppress Mao Dai. In fact, he was only at the early stage of the fourth Severance, while Mao Dai was at the peak stage of the third Severance. Moreover, he had also accumulated experience at this cultivation level for an extremely long time. Thus, his battle prowess had already been tempered to an extremely powerful level. If the young man were at the peak stage of the fourth Severance, and if Mao Dai were at the early stage of the fourth Severance, he would definitely be powerful enough to turn the tables. "Black Jade Hand," the young man roared with a sneer. Wong. His hands became black, but this wasn't a dark and inky black. Rather, it was a semi-transparent and jade-like black. However, there were also visible black veins in his jade-like hands, and these veins were pulsating with numerous symbols of the Great Tao. Secret technique of the Fu clan, Black Jade Hand. Mao Dai also roared as he beat his chest, and a bright red light instantly burst forth from his eyes. His battle prowess rose by a significant amount as he moved to block the Black Jade Hand. Boom! The Black Jade Hand spread open and enveloped the surroundings. This was a crushing attack, and as the Black Jade Hand pressed down, Mao Dai was much like a grasshopper trying to block a cart. His struggle was completely futile. Pong! The earth trembled, and bursts of golden light instantly rose from the ground. However, this tremor quickly died down. The academy was protected by formations, and these formations would automatically activate when they detected powerful shockwaves. The dust settled, and one could see that Mao Dai was still standing. However, his face had already become as white as a sheet, and there was also blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. His eyes were filled with fury. Meanwhile, the young man didn't look to be in a much better situation. This was most likely because the Black Jade Hand had expended much of his energy. However, Mao Dai had definitely suffered heavier wounds than him. After all, he was inferior in cultivation level, and he had just blocked such a powerful attack. "Are you going to crawl or not?" the young man asked as he spread his legs apart and pointed between them. Mao Dai clenched his hands into fists, and the veins on his arms were bulging. He definitely wouldn't accept such humiliation. However, this was his first day at the Heavenly Dragon Academy, so he definitely couldn't be late or missing. Otherwise, how would the teachers of the academy view him? How arrogant and careless would that be? Meanwhile, Ling Han was pondering over how the large black dog would react. If it were him, he would definitely agree without hesitation. While crawling through, he would then bite either the young man's weenie or his bum. He would definitely give the young man all the joy that he could wish for. However, only the large black dog could do such a thing. Ordinary people definitely wouldn't dare to emulate him. They wouldn't have the face to do so. Ling Han flicked his sleeves and strode forward, saying, "What incredible rules! One needs to crawl through a dog flap before entering the academy." The young man faltered upon hearing this. However, he instantly flared up in rage when he came to his senses. "Dog flap? In other words, you're calling me a dog? Fuck." "Ling Han?" the young man asked. His gaze became piercing, and an expression of ridicule spread across his face. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Since when had he become so famous in the Fu clan? He nodded and replied, "Indeed, your grandpa is none other than me, Ding Xiaoqin." If Ding Xiaoqin still had a spirit after death, he would definitely spit a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. How many times did Ling Han want to impersonate him? The young man was enraged upon hearing this. "My grandpa definitely isn't as young as you." However, he forcefully suppressed his anger and said in a solemn voice, "I'm Fu Zhengtong. I've never heard of you before. Which small fry are you?" Ling Han said with a wave of his hand. He didn't give the young man any face at all. The young man had treated Mao Dai with such disrespect, so Ling Han was naturally feeling extremely unhappy with him. "I've always heard that you were extremely arrogant." "Sure enough, you're as arrogant as can be," Fu Zhengtong said coldly. Chapter 1769, Caught in the Crossfire. Chapter 1769, Caught in the Crossfire. "Always heard? Heard from whom?" Ling Han gazed at the young man and said, "Oh, I seem to be fairly famous." "I'm not praising you," Fu Zhengtong couldn't help but shout. For some reason, he was easily triggered by Ling Han. "Who's always talking about me?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Fu Zhengtong chuckled coldly. He then stared at Ling Han for a while before answering, "The holy son of the lunar sect. Bei Xianming?" Ling Han involuntarily said a silent, "Oh," in his mind. There was no such thing as random love in this world, and there was similarly no such thing as random hate. Even a profligate disciple like Fu Zhengtong wouldn't randomly block the entrance to the academy for no good reason. However, if he were an acquaintance of Bei Xianming, then everything would make perfect sense. Bei Xianming had suffered at the hands of Ling Han before, so he was now encouraging Fu Zhengtong to block the gate to the academy. As for Mao Dai, he was simply someone who had been caught in the crossfire. Anyhow, it was unclear whether Fu Zhengtong had decided to have some fun first, or he had purposely targeted Mao Dai because he knew about his good relationship with Ling Han. In any case, Mao Dai had definitely been dragged into this mess by Ling Han. Ling Han rubbed his nose upon thinking of this. Since this was the case, he would simply beat Fu Zhengtong to exact revenge for Mao Dai. This was only a beating, so it wouldn't matter too much, right? To say nothing of his relationship with Fu Gaoyun, just his relationship with the two great alchemists was enough for him to act arrogantly in the Fu clan. Of course, this arrogance naturally came with a limit. "Are you Bei Shuaming's lackey?" he asked with a smile. "He was pummeled by me, yet he doesn't dare to challenge me face to face, so he encouraged trash like you to cause trouble for me?" "Trash?" Fu Zhengtong almost jumped up in fury. He was a member of the Fu clan. What did this mean? This meant that everyone in the surrounding 10,000 or so cities would need to respectfully refer to him as Young Master Tong. even if they were dividing soul tier elites. You have no background, and you've only just advanced to the severing mundane tier. Yet, you actually dare to act so wantonly before me? Ling Han, do you think you can act arrogantly and wantonly just because you have the support of Fu Gaoyun? Fu Zhengtong asked with a cold chuckle. There was a strong sense of disdain in his voice. However, his eyes suddenly lit up when he saw the arriving Empress and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. More precisely, it was because he had seen the Empress. Although the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was also stunningly beautiful, one could still find around 10 similarly beautiful women in any one city. Moreover, she hadn't reached the severing mundane tier yet, so she wasn't overly attractive to Fu Zhengtong. However, the Empress was completely different. Although her true appearance was concealed, her figure was far too shapely and perfect. Combined with her mysterious and noble aura, as well as her severing mundane tier cultivation, Fu Zhengtong's heart instantly started to thump in excitement. With his power and status, he didn't only consider a woman's appearance and figure when he toyed with them. More of the time, he would focus on their aura, disposition, status, and cultivation level. When taking a female companion, those at the Genesis tier would be nothing more than mere decoration. However, a female companion at the severing mundane tier would be completely different. Everyone would be envious. For example, Fu Zhengtong was extremely envious of Ling Han right now. This was because even he didn't have a severing mundane tier Dao partner. Oh, Ling Han replied. So, Fu Gaoyun isn't the successor of the Fu clan? He's only one of the potential successors. Fu Zhengtong said in disdain. Oh, so you're another potential successor then? Ling Han said with a chuckle. He was naturally saying this to mock Fu Zhengtong. He hadn't even performed flawless severances, so the Fu clan would definitely be mocked to death if someone like him were to become the future clan leader of the Fu clan. However, Fu Zhengtong wasn't enraged upon hearing this. Instead, he said with an expression of yearning, I naturally don't have the right to become a potential successor. However, young Master Hai does. He's the future hope of the Fu clan. If Fu Gaoyun, trash who only knows how to play instruments, becomes the future clan leader of the Fu clan, then it will be utter humiliation for the entire clan. By the looks of it, the Fu clan was also divided into many different factions. Moreover, the position of clan leader was far too attractive, so much so that it caused division between the clan members. Everyone supported their own leader. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. Fu Zhengtong hadn't come here to target him simply because of the animosity between him and Bei Xianming. It was also because he had become far too friendly with Fu Gaoyun. As such, he was being targeted by the faction of young Master Hai. As it turned out, he was also someone who was caught in the crossfire. Mao Dai had been caught in the crossfire because of him, and he had been caught in the crossfire because of Fu Gaoyun. I don't care about the Fu clan's internal matters. I don't care about who becomes the clan leader of the Fu clan, either. Ling Han shook his head and continued, however, since you've provoked me, I can't let this slide unless I give you a beating. Haha, you're only a measly first severance cultivator. Who do you think you are? Fu Zhengtong roared with laughter. Did this person truly think that he could act wantonly just because he was slightly more talented? Ling Han grinned and said, Why speak so much nonsense? Hurry up and fight me. It's my hobby to pummel people like you. Impudence. Fu Zhengtong roared. He immediately charged forward to attack Ling Han. Boom. Countless regulations erupted from his body, transforming into lengths of black chain that arched up into a net that looked much like a hunting spider. Ling Han dashed forward to meet Fu Zhengtong's attack. The Empress' battle prowess was slightly inferior to his, and at this moment, she could only rival elites at the third severance. She couldn't rival those at the fourth severance. However, if she advanced to the peak stage of the second severance, she would most likely be able to rival those at the early stage of the fourth severance. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden naturally couldn't rival those at the severing mundane tier. Ling Han reached over, and he immediately grabbed one of the chains of regulations. With a powerful pull, Fu Zhengtong couldn't help but stumble forward. Meanwhile, Ling Han borrowed this momentum to dash forward, throwing a punch as he did so. Fu Zhengtong was greatly astonished. It looked like Ling Han was grabbing a chain, yet in reality, he was actually grabbing onto regulations. The Great Tao was formless, so how could it be grabbed? Moreover, this had caused a backlash to strike his body, making him involuntarily stumble. Ling Han was an absolute freak. Second severance. Fu Zhengtong yelped in astonishment. Since Ling Han had unleashed his aura, he could naturally determine Ling Han's cultivation level. What kind of first severance was this? If this was the first severance, then he would hack his head off and use it as a football. That fucking Bei Xianming was far too unreliable. And he had even said that Ling Han had only just advanced to the Severing Mundane tier in the Severing Mundane pool. He had clearly advanced to the second severance there. Perhaps Ling Han had advanced from the first severance to the second severance in these past few years? Even if he were beaten to death, Fu Zhengtong would still refuse to believe this. After all, did this make any sense? However, he quickly composed himself, saying, "So what if you're at the second severance?" There was disdain on his face, and he immediately raised his fist to throw another punch at Ling Han. Even king tiers were only invincible against those at the same cultivation level. For example, king tiers who had reached the peak stage of the second severance could indeed surpass the barrier in cultivation level and rival those at the early stage of the third severance. However, they would definitely be pummeled by those at the middle stage of the third severance. Right now, Fu Zhengtong was at the early stage of the fourth severance, so what did it matter even if Ling Han were a king tier at the peak stage of the second severance? Before Fu Zhengtong, he was nothing but trash. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle and say, "You're the one who's faltering and being astonished, yet you're also the one who's saying that there's nothing wrong. It's such a shame that you're not an actor. It's an absolute waste of your talent." Pong! Their fists collided, and both of them instantly stumbled back in retreat. After stabilizing themselves, they couldn't help but stumble back several more steps. Only then were they finally able to completely stabilize themselves. They were evenly matched in this exchange. An expression of astonishment spread across Fu Zhengtong's face. This was far too terrifying. Ling Han was only at the second severance, yet he was already able to rival him? Although he was only at the early stage of the fourth severance, he should have still been far more powerful than Ling Han, who was only at the peak stage of the second severance at most. Fuck. What kind of freak is he? Chapter 1770. Might of the Divine Demon Sword. Chapter 1770. Might of the Divine Demon Sword. Fu Zhengtong refused to believe this. He didn't dare to believe this. This had shattered the iron rules of the cultivation world, and it was something that should have been completely impossible to achieve. He had definitely made a mistake. His opponent was actually at the third severance. Yes, he was actually at the peak stage of the third severance. What a sneaky brat. You're clearly at the third severance, yet you've purposefully practiced some cultivation technique to manipulate your aura and trick your opponents. Fu Zhengtong said through clenched teeth. This kind of person was truly far too detestable. They didn't focus on raising their cultivation, and they instead relied on these evil little trickeries. Ling Han was astounded. Fu Zhengtong was far too skilled at speaking absolute bullshit. You're nothing but a frog that sits at the bottom of a well, Ling Han said. He couldn't be bothered arguing with him anymore. He raised his fists and unleashed more of his battle prowess. Suppress. Fu Zhengtong roared. He immediately composed himself. Their battle prowess was almost identical, so now it was a battle between whose celestial technique was more powerful. As a member of the Fu clan, how could he lose to this country bumpkin? Boom, boom, boom. They collided again, with both of them unleashing waves of celestial techniques. At the same time, regulations transformed into spears and chains that whistled through the sky and shook the earth. Fortunately, there were formations protecting the academy and its surroundings. As such, it would be extremely difficult to damage the surroundings. Even so, the surrounding earth was still filled with lumps and craters, making it look like a pockmarked face. Ling Han had to admit that those at the fourth severance were indeed extremely powerful. Even though Fu Zhengtong was only at the early stage of the fourth severance, and even though he had only performed normal severances, he could still manage to rival Ling Han's battle prowess. Ling Han was sighing in emotion. However, if passers-by witnessed this battle, their eyes would definitely bulge out in disbelief. You're only at the fucking second severance. Sure enough, because this was the entrance to the academy where people continued to enter and exit, it wasn't long before people noticed the battle between Ling Han and Fu Zhengtong. They couldn't help but walk over to spectate. Of course, some of them also noticed the Empress, and they couldn't help but continue to glance over at her. However, even the Empress' stunning figure couldn't hold their gazes for too long. This was because they discovered that Ling Han was only at the second severance. This was far too astonishing. How could a cultivator at the second severance be so powerful? If he reached the fourth severance, then wouldn't he be able to rival those at the dividing soul tier? They were so stunned that even the Empress' charisma seemed weaker than normal. Of course, this was also because the Empress had concealed her true appearance. Otherwise, even the presence of a Celestial King tier elite might not attract as much attention as her. Fight, fight, fight. Ling Han unleashed his full power. Being weaker by 2 minor levels, he finally found an opponent he could battle against without restraint. Otherwise, even king tiers at the third severance would be comprehensively suppressed by him. Only those at the peak stage might be able to rival him. He became increasingly enthusiastic. Meanwhile, Fu Zhengtong started to feel increasingly apprehensive. After all, Ling Han didn't seem like he was at the third severance no matter how he looked at him. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Had he been screwed over by Bei Ximing? Bei Ximing hadn't said that Ling Han had defeated him. Instead, he had only said that Ling Han had offended him, and that Ling Han was far too friendly with Fu Gaoyun. Upon hearing this, young Master Hai had casually said that he would give Ling Han a lesson. Now, however, who was giving whom a lesson? Yet, their battle had already reached such a stage, so Fu Zhengtong naturally couldn't give up and retreat. Instead, he definitely had to achieve victory. Otherwise, what face would he have? He opened his mouth and spat out a miniature sword that started to expand in the air. This sword then eventually transformed into an azure blade 3 feet long that was engraved with snake-like patterns. Fu Zhengtong immediately imbued his origin power into the blade. Wong! The sword instantly lit up, releasing numerous projections of giant snakes that started to hiss at Ling Han. Defeat him! Fu Zhengtong roared as he slashed his sword at Ling Han. Xiao, xiao, xiao. The giant snakes slithered through the air to attack Ling Han. You think only you have a pseudo-celestial tool? Ling Han asked. He immediately unsheathed his divine demon sword. Coincidentally, he had just raised the toughness of this sword to the level of 2-star pseudo-celestial tool. As such, now was a good time to test its might. Wong! The divine demon sword shuddered slightly, yet it didn't unleash any rays of brilliant light. In fact, not even symbols of the great Tao materialized on the blade of the sword. At a glance, this looked like an incredibly ordinary sword. In fact, Ling Han had already erased all of the saintly patterns that had previously existed on the sword. After all, those saintly patterns were nothing more than imperfections to the current divine demon sword. The divine demon sword looked as ordinary as could be, yet when Ling Han slashed down, it released bursts of sword light that illuminated the sky. At the same time, countless bursts of sword chi surged forth, and it was as if they wanted to shatter the entire sky. Pa, 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 pa. The projections of the giant snakes were immediately obliterated by the countless bursts of sword chi. However, the bursts of sword chi didn't dissipate, and they instead continued to slash at the nearby Fu Zhengtong. What? Fu Zhengtong was completely astounded. He had retrieved his pseudo-celestial tool to settle victory and defeat in one resolute attack. Yet who would have thought that the country bumpkin would also retrieve a pseudo-celestial tool? Moreover, Ling Han's pseudo-celestial tool was even more powerful than his. He frantically shot back in retreat. The bursts of sword chi from the divine demon sword were far too terrifying. In fact, they were powerful enough to easily slice through his flesh. Although they weren't powerful enough to kill him, who would want to suffer severe wounds for no good reason? Just then, they had still been evenly matched. However, with the addition of the divine demon sword, the battle instantly started to become one-sided. In just a dozen or so exchanges, Fu Jingtong was severely wounded by sword qi, with blood gushing from his wounds. Being cut by the divine demon sword was definitely no joke. Moreover, Fu Jingtong had only been cut by the sword qi. If he had been cut by the actual divine demon sword, he would have been dead already. Fu Jingtong retreated for at least 50 kilometers before coming to a stop. Meanwhile, he continued to stare at Ling Han, who was still standing in the distance. At this moment, he had truly lost all face. He had initially wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson, yet it was now him who was being taught a lesson. Moreover, this had been witnessed by countless people. If word of this got back to young Master Hai, perhaps he would even be scolded and fall out of favor. After all, young Master Hai didn't need trash. However, should he continue to fight against Ling Han? Forget about it. He didn't want to get pummeled. Meanwhile, the spectators were all engaged in spirited discussions before the gate of the academy. They didn't know who Ling Han was, so they were all speculating about his background. Lord Mao. Ling Han said in greeting and nodded at Mao Dai. Mao Dai sighed with emotion. Back then, he had even wanted to take Ling Han as his disciple. Now, however, Ling Han's cultivation level was only a single severance lower than his. In terms of battle prowess, Ling Han had more so surpassed him by a significant amount. He could barely accept this reality. Don't call me Lord anymore. I'm not the commander of the Dark Moon Army anymore, and your battle prowess is also superior to mine, Mao Dai said with a serious expression. When cultivators communicated with each other, strength was of utmost importance. Thus, Mao Dai felt extremely uncomfortable when Ling Han referred to him using such an unfitting title. Ling Han didn't insist anymore, and he said, "Then I'll call you Brother Mao." Mao Dai nodded upon hearing this. However, just as he was about to enter the academy with Ling Han, he suddenly saw someone walking out. This person was none other than Fu Gaoyun. "Brother Ling, I heard that you got into a fight?" Fu Gaoyun looked around, and he asked, "Where's your opponent? Where are they?" "The fight's over," Ling Han replied with a smile. "Over so quickly? I wasn't even able to enjoy the show." "Oh, that's right. You're far too good at causing trouble. How did you get into a fight on your first day at the academy?" Fu Gaoyun asked teasingly. Ling Han rolled his eyes and replied, "Isn't this all thanks to you? Anyway, how many potential successors does the Fu clan have?" "Why are you suddenly asking this?" Fu Gaoyun asked in slight curiosity. "The person I was fighting with just then was called Fu Jingtong. He said that young Master Hai or something wanted to teach me a lesson. He also told me not to be friends with a weak person like you anymore." "What?" Fu Gaoyun exclaimed in astonishment. "You were fighting with Fu Jingtong? Heavens, that was a fourth severance elite." Chapter 1771, Show of Strength. Chapter 1771, Show of Strength. After some thorough questioning, Ling Han finally learned that there was indeed more than one potential successor in the Fu clan. In reality, 3-star forces and above would all raise more than one potential successor. Otherwise, what would they do if their successor suddenly died one day? At that time, how long would it take to raise another successor? Generally speaking, these forces would raise around 4 to 5 potential successors at any one time. When it came to top-notch great sects, they would more so raise 10 or more potential successors at once. These forces were extremely wealthy, and they also possessed astounding power and potential. Thus, it was only natural that they raised numerous potential successors. Moreover, having several potential successors would also push them to compete with each other, and thus raise their own strength and abilities. This would in turn allow them to become even more impressive and outstanding. For example, the Lunar Sect had 7 potential successors, with Bei Xinming being only one of them. His desire to become Dao partners with Fu Xiaoyun was also partly because he wanted the support of the Fu clan, as this would help him solidify his spot as a holy son. After all, the position of potential successor wasn't guaranteed. If someone more outstanding were to appear, the weakest of the 7 potential successors would be immediately demoted. They wouldn't need to wait until the previous sect leader retired. Regarding the Fu clan, because they were inferior to the lunar sect even though they were both 3-star forces, they also had fewer potential successors than the lunar sect. Right now, they only had 4 potential successors. Apart from Fu Gaoyun and young Master Hai, also known as Fu Tonghai, there was also Fu Xiuping and Fu Bingbing. Among them, Fu Gaoyun was the newest potential successor as he had replaced the original and weakest potential successor. Meanwhile, Fu Xiaoyun also had the potential to become a successor, and it was because of this that some members of the clan wanted to marry her out. If she married into the lunar sect, she naturally couldn't become a potential successor of the Fu clan anymore. Right now, there was a huge gulf between the cultivation levels of the 4 potential successors. For example, the most powerful Fu Xiuping had already reached the dividing soul tier. Moreover, he was a heaven soul elite. Of course, he had already cultivated for an astonishingly long time. In fact, he had already cultivated for over 10 billion years. After him was Fu Bingbing. She was an earth soul elite, and even though she had cultivated for a shorter period of time compared to Fu Xiuping, she had still already cultivated for a whopping 8 billion or so years. Fu Tonghai was far younger than them, and he had only cultivated for around 1 billion years. He had just advanced to the dividing soul tier, and he had also been the most supported potential successor in the past. However, following Fu Gaoyun's sudden promotion, his popularity and support were instantly faced with a huge threat. Fu Gaoyun was more talented than him, although it wasn't by much. However, picking the clan leader was a task of picking the most talented among the talented. As such, any advantage in talent was naturally extremely valuable. Thus, the conflict between Fu Tonghai and Fu Gaoyun was by far the most intense. According to the rules of the Fu clan, potential successors couldn't directly fight with each other. Otherwise, it would be far too unfair. However, they could rely on their followers to compete with each other. In the past, Fu Tonghai had enjoyed the most support, so he naturally had the most followers as well. Meanwhile, Fu Gaoyun had only been promoted not long ago, so he had far fewer supporters than Fu Tonghai. Moreover, his supporters were also far weaker than Fu Tonghai's supporters. Fortunately, the cultivation level of their followers was strictly limited to the severing mundane tier. This was to ensure fairness, and it was also because dividing soul tier elites could already be regarded as powerful beings in 3-star forces. Thus, how could they become the followers of these youths? Of course, since Fu Xiuping had already been a potential successor for so long, some of his earliest followers had already advanced to the dividing soul tier. In this case, they were allowed to remain as his followers. It was just that they couldn't participate in the conflicts between followers anymore. Upon hearing Fu Gaoyun's explanation, Ling Han realized that he had unknowingly charged headfirst into another complicated conflict. If Fu Gaoyun hadn't recruited him, he wouldn't have faced any problem at all. Now, however, he had attracted the attention of Fu Tonghai. Perhaps he had also attracted the attention of Fu Xiuping and Fu Bingbing. Most importantly, the Fu clan didn't allow their members to directly fight with each other. However, he was an outsider, so who knew whether someone would find him annoying and attempt to kill him? Was he truly a magnet for trouble? Fu Gaoyun tugged at Ling Han's arm with a smile and said, "Come, I'll introduce you to a few friends." This academy was as large as a planet, so the residential areas for the students were also as extravagant as could be. Fu Gaoyun led Ling Han and his 3 companions to a courtyard that was situated on a mountainside and next to a limpid river. As they entered, they were immediately welcomed by servants. Upon entering the courtyard, they saw that there was currently a gathering being held here. There were a dozen or so people drinking tea and conversing. When they saw Fu Gaoyun, they immediately stood up to greet him. "Come, let me introduce these 4 friends to everyone. This is Ling Han, Brother Ling. These 2 celestial maidens are Brother Ling's Dao partners, and this over here is Mao Dai, Brother Mao." Fu Gaoyun briefly introduced Ling Han and his 3 companions. "Brother Ling, Brother Mao," the people said in greeting and clasped their hands. As for the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, they simply nodded at them in acknowledgement. After all, they were Ling Han's wives, so they couldn't act too familiar with them. Ling Han and Mao Dai also clasped their hands in greeting. They were being treated with respect, so they naturally had to respond with respect as well. It seems like young Master Yun holds you in extremely high regard. Hey, a young man who was holding a teacup said. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han, and he continued, "Come, I'll use tea as wine and give a toast to Brother Ling." He was feeling slightly bitter at this moment. This was because Fu Gaoyun had personally gone to invite Ling Han and his companions. Moreover, since Ling Han was with his wives, it was clear that he was the person being invited by Fu Gaoyun. What right did he have to enjoy this treatment? The corners of Ling Han's lips curled up into a slight smile. He truly didn't care about who became the clan leader of the Fu clan. However, if anyone dared to provoke him, he definitely wouldn't show any mercy either. He was just about to raise his cup and punish the young man, yet the Empress suddenly reached over to stop him. "You don't have the right to enjoy tea with my husband," the Empress said. Her slender hand pushed forward, and it was as quick and powerful as lightning. The young man's expression instantly changed. He hurriedly raised his other hand to block, yet he was no match for the Empress at all. Tea sprayed from his cup and drenched his entire face. Who told him to have bad intentions? He said that he was toasting Ling Han, yet he actually wanted to target and embarrass Ling Han. Everyone was slightly surprised upon seeing this. This young man was called Jin Jiyu, and he was a junior of the Jin clan, a subordinate clan of the Fu clan. His cultivation talent was decent, and he had a chance to become a pillar of the Jin clan in the future. When competing for the position of clan leader, Fu Gaoyun and the others didn't only compete for the support of those in the Fu clan. They also competed for the support of those in the subordinate forces. Meanwhile, these subordinate forces would also seize this opportunity to raise their own status. If they picked the right person, their status would definitely rise by a significant amount. However, if they picked the wrong person, their fate would definitely be miserable. As the saying went, each leader would reshuffle their own subordinates. Jin Jiyu was at the peak stage of the second severance. Although he hadn't performed flawless severances, his severances weren't much weaker than a flawless severance. In fact, he was only slightly weaker than Fu Gaoyun. However, he was still completely no match for the Empress. This was quite scary. Even Fu Gaoyun hadn't expected this. He knew that the Empress was powerful, yet this was far too powerful, no? Haha, we're all a family, so there's no need to ruin the friendly atmosphere, he hurriedly said. These were all his followers, so he naturally couldn't allow them to become hostile with each other. Otherwise, how would he compete against the other potential successors? Jin Jiyu finally came to his senses, and there was a hint of fear in his eyes as he glanced at the Empress. With just a single exchange, he already knew that he was far inferior to the Empress. The gulf between them was far too huge, so much so that it couldn't be surmounted even if he used his trump cards. With this show of strength, everyone instantly became friendly and enthusiastic. In reality, cultivators were fairly realistic people, and they would immediately become obedient if they were beaten enough times. Everyone conversed as they drank tea, and they also exchanged their understandings of cultivation. At this moment, someone said, "Young Master Yun, why don't you play a few pieces for us?" Fu Gaoyun's expression instantly darkened. Chapter 1772, Playing a Piece. Chapter 1772, Playing a Piece. Fu Gaoyun enjoyed music, and this was something that everyone was aware of. Thus, it was also extremely easy for his followers to flatter him. They simply needed to ask him to play a few pieces, and this would definitely delight Fu Gaoyun to no end. However, now was different. After being led astray by Ling Han, Fu Gaoyun seldom played his guqin anymore. This was because he would involuntarily recall descending lotus flowers each time he tried to play a piece. In the end, he would go completely astray and start playing the descending lotus flowers instead. As a young master of the Fu clan, how could he play such a tasteless piece? Thus, asking him to play a piece or two wasn't flattering him anymore. Instead, it was offending him. "Yeah, that's right. Young Master Yun, why don't you play a piece of two?" someone else said in encouragement. How could they know about the trauma in Fu Gaoyun's mind? Thus, they all started to encourage him to play a few pieces. Fu Gaoyun couldn't withstand their enthusiasm, so he could only retrieve his guqin and forcefully calm himself down. Many days had passed, and with his powerful mindset, he had naturally walked out from that crooked path already. However, the condition was that he didn't think of Ling Han. Otherwise, his tune would definitely go astray again. I won't think about it. I won't think about it. He closed his eyes and placed his fingers onto the guqin. Clear and spring-like sounds instantly flowed out from his instrument. Objectively speaking, Fu Gaoyun was indeed extremely talented in music. Of course, this was fairly inevitable. After all, having lived long enough, and having enough talent, what couldn't one become skilled at as long as they put in the effort? Everyone swayed their head in intoxication. Regardless of whether they truly enjoyed music or not, they definitely had to act as if they did at this moment. Meanwhile, Ling Han yawned in boredom. He didn't have a single artistic bone in his body, and if he had the spare time, he would rather cultivate or research alchemy than waste his time listening to music. He smiled at the Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and a mischievous thought was already forming in his mind. He extended a finger and started to lightly tap the teacup before him. This was none other than the tune of descending lotus flowers. This sound was extremely soft, yet almost everyone present was at the severing mundane tier. As such, how could they not hear it? However, most of them didn't mind, as the sound was truly very soft. Yet, it was a completely different situation for Fu Gaoyun. His eyes were closed, and his mind was completely focused. To him, listening to himself playing the guqin was a great source of enjoyment. At this moment, however, a familiar tune suddenly crept into his mind. Descending lotus flowers. There was a ring, and the tune of his piece immediately started to change. Fu Gaoyun almost choked upon hearing this. No, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to listen. He hurriedly repeated this in his mind, yet the more he repeated it, the clearer that faint sound became. In the end, it transformed into a roaring river that surged through his mind. In the end, his fingers also started to go astray, and he started to play descending lotus flowers instead. Everyone faltered upon hearing this, and they couldn't help but exchange confused glances. They could all see the puzzlement and awkwardness in each other's eyes. What in the world was young Master Yun playing? Why did it sound like the story of a beggar? Forget about it. Forget about it. Fu Gaoyun said. He finally came to his senses, and he immediately pushed his guqin away. His expression was as if he had endured great humiliation. Meanwhile, everyone else was wearing strange expressions. They wanted to laugh, yet they didn't dare to. They wanted to speak, yet they also didn't dare to. They felt as stifled as could be. Ha 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 ha. However, Ling Han immediately roared with laughter. He was the culprit, and he also dared to admit that he was the culprit. Facing Ling Han, Fu Gaoyun could only shake his head in exasperation. What's so enjoyable? A young man asked as he walked over. He was stumbling a little, and his steps were slightly uneven. Brother Cheng, everyone immediately said in greeting. This person was Cheng Zhong, a member of the Cheng clan, one of the most powerful subordinate clans of the Fu clan. Thus, Cheng Zhong's support was incredibly important to Fu Gaoyun. Of course, it was still difficult to say who would become the next clan leader of the Cheng clan. It wasn't necessarily certain that Cheng Zhong would become the future clan leader. Because of the Cheng clan's power, it was only natural that everyone treated Cheng Zhong with respect. In fact, even Fu Gaoyun had to give him face. Cheng Zhong, what's wrong? Fu Gaoyun asked casually. Cheng Zhong shook his head and replied, Don't mention it. I was bitten by a dog. What? Everyone almost spat out a mouthful of tea upon hearing this. After all, this was far too ridiculous. What was Cheng Zhong's cultivation level? He was at the middle stage of the 4th severance. At the same time, he was also the most powerful follower of Fu Gaoyun. However, an elite such as him had actually been bitten by a dog? If word of this spread, they would definitely be mocked to death. Meanwhile, Ling Han wore a strange expression upon hearing this. Why did this sound so familiar? How is that possible? Fu Gaoyun asked in astonishment. However, he immediately saw the funny side of this, and he asked, You're so powerful, so how could you have been bitten by a dog? Sigh. Cheng Zhong sighed loudly before saying, I don't know what happened, either. I came across Fu Zhengtong when I was heading over, and seeing him running away in disarray, I casually asked how a dog like him had been wounded. However, a large black dog suddenly leaped out from nowhere, and it viciously bit at my bum. It bloody hurt like hell. Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. He had been bitten just like that? He was at the 4th severance. With this information, Ling Han could already confirm that this was the act of none other than the large black dog. Strange. Why had that detestable dog suddenly run over here? Whom did it want to screw over now? When did such a beast appear in the heaven-departing city? Fu Gaoyun asked in puzzlement. Did some powerful being obtain a new immortal beast pet, but not eliminate its wild tendencies yet? No. Cheng Zhong said with a shake of his head. That large black dog was even wearing a pair of iron underwear, and it was so dazzling that it almost blinded me. It was a horrible sight. Pooh. Someone finally couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of tea. Come, sit over here and calm down first, Fu Gaoyun said. It was hard to seek revenge after being bitten by a dog. After all, they couldn't go over to bite the dog, could they? Cheng Zhong hurriedly shook his hands and said, No need. No need. How would he dare to sit? His bum was hurting like crazy. Everyone grinned in their minds. This was a fairly hilarious encounter. Of course, it was a miserable encounter for the person who was involved. I've gathered everyone here today not only to touch base, but also to discuss an important matter. Fu Gaoyun raised his hand and signified for silence. The Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm is about to open, and we need to determine who's going to enter. Everyone's eyes lit up at the mention of the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. This was most likely the ruins of some ancient great sect. When discovered in the past, there had even been a piece of divine metal inside, and this had triggered an earth-shattering battle between 3 Celestial King tier forces. From that point onward, no other rare treasures had appeared in the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, but some powerful forces would still occasionally send some people over to try their luck. However, such situations were relatively rare. To the Fu clan, however, the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm was an incredibly important resource. This was because the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm produced a kind of matter called Blood Dragon Stones. These Blood Dragon Stones were extremely helpful in raising the cultivation level of those at the Severing Mundane tier, and they could even strengthen one's divine sense and help them build a solid foundation for advancing to the Dividing Soul tier. From time to time, they would also find some lost cultivation techniques and celestial techniques in this mystery realm. Once perfected, these cultivation techniques and celestial techniques could potentially even reach the level of the Immortal Palace tier or Ascending Origin tier. These were incredibly freakish techniques. Anyhow, because of the earth-shattering battle that had occurred inside the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, there were currents of extremely terrifying auras suffusing the entire mystery realm. However, once every 30 million years, a volcano inside the mystery realm would erupt, temporarily suppressing the wild and terrifying auras. During this time, cultivators would be able to enter. Moreover, apart from lava, this volcano also produced blood dragon stones. Even so, one would still need to wear outer garments that were specially made from scraps of blood dragon stones if they wanted to safely enter the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. Otherwise, their fate could only be death. However, these outer garments were extremely rare, and their effects would also weaken with the passing of time. Thus, they were essentially single-use items. That being the case, only a limited number of people were allowed to enter the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. Chapter 1773, Fighting Over Spots. Chapter 1773, Fighting Over Spots. Everyone looked toward Fu Gaoyun eagerly in expectation. The Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm wasn't fully controlled by the Fu clan. Instead, it was jointly controlled by the 4 nearby 3-star forces. At the same time, some of the further 3-star forces would also stick their noses into this matter. However, they were only allowed to send smaller teams of people. Moreover, the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm also had a restriction. Only those at the Severing Mundane tier could enter. It wasn't that those at the Dividing Soul tier and Immortal Palace tier couldn't enter. Rather, It was just that they couldn't venture too deep into the mystery realm. As such, it would be a massive waste of the blood dragon armors. To youths, entering the hidden dragon mystery realm signified a potentially huge turning point in their lives. If they were fortunate enough to come across a Celestial King tier celestial technique and swallow a few celestial pills, they would become as freakish as could be. Fu Gaoyun was one of the 4 potential successors of the Fu clan, so he was able to give out 10 spots. One of the spots would definitely be reserved for himself, so there were only 9 spots remaining. Young Master Yun, I'm willing to follow you. I'm willing to wade through fire and water to serve you. Someone immediately shouted. Their expression of loyalty was as fake as could be. Under their pretense, they were essentially asking for a spot to enter the hidden dragon mystery realm. Young Master Yun, I'm willing to be your loyal servant. Young Master Yun. Young Master Yun. Many people started to call out, and they all expressed their willingness to serve Fu Gaoyun. However, there were also those who were relatively more reserved. For example, Cheng Zhong. He was a prodigy of the Cheng clan, so he would receive a spot from his clan even if he didn't receive one from Fu Gaoyun. As one of the 5 most powerful subordinate forces of the Fu clan, the Cheng clan could naturally receive a portion of the spots to enter the mystery realm. However, this portion was naturally far smaller than what the Fu clan received. Anyhow, since Cheng Zhong had decided to support Fu Gaoyun, he would definitely feel resentment toward Fu Gaoyun if he didn't end up giving him a spot. At that time, it was extremely likely that he would leave to support another potential successor. Everything depended on how Fu Gaoyun allocated the spots. This was a test of his leadership skills, and this was something that each clan leader needed to learn about. He definitely couldn't satisfy everyone, so this was a huge test regarding how he would make his choices, as well as how he would console those who weren't selected. Ling Han didn't speak. He knew about the hidden dragon mystery realm, so he decided to obtain a few more blood dragon stones for Fu Gaoyun if he ended up giving him a spot. Such would be his repayment. Even if he didn't obtain enough blood dragon stones, he would still have things like the reincarnation tea to use as a substitute. He would definitely repay Fu Gaoyun if he received a spot. Anyhow, Ling Han's biggest value was his potential. He had the potential to become a Celestial King tier elite, and he also had the potential to become a 5-star alchemist. Everything came down to Fu Gaoyun's judgment, as well as his determination to gamble. Moreover, since Fu Gaoyun had announced this to everyone, he had naturally considered all of the possibilities already. He slowly opened his mouth to assign the 9 spots. Sure enough, Cheng Zhong received one of the spots. A person called Li Xian also received a spot. After them, Ling Han and the Empress also received a spot each. As for the final 5 spots, Fu Gaoyun put them up for anyone to receive. They would hold a small competition, and those who achieved victory would receive these spots. Through this method, those who lost wouldn't have anyone to complain to. After all, this was the cultivation world where might made right. After the competition, those who won naturally felt nothing but joy. However, those who lost felt extremely dissatisfied with Ling Han and the Empress receiving 2 of the spots. What right did they have? They had only just arrived, and they didn't have any powerful background either. Yet, they had received 2 of the spots just like that. Who could accept this? However, they didn't dare to express their dissatisfaction before Fu Gaoyun. Thus, they all buried this emotion into the bottom of their hearts. They definitely couldn't swallow this bitter pill. When the gathering ended, Ling Han and the Empress went to their residence in the academy. This was a large residence. In fact, it was essentially a huge courtyard. There were even hundreds of servants, and all of them were at least at the heavenly body tier. This was incredibly extravagant. Fu Gaoyun was very understanding, and he didn't organize 3 separate residences for Ling Han and his 2 wives. Instead, he put them all in the same residence. Right after settling in, Ling Han was informed by a servant that someone had come to visit. Ling Han pondered for a moment before telling the servant to invite the guest in. This was a man in azure robes. His name was Zhao Peng, and Ling Han had seen him during the gathering just then. He was at the peak stage of the first severance, and he hadn't managed to win a spot during the competition just then. Zhao Mingpeng walked into the hall before glancing at Ling Han and disdainfully saying, you're Ling Han, right? Visit young Master Yun tomorrow and tell him that you don't want to go to the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. Instead, transfer the spot to me. However, I won't take your spot for nothing. Here." He tossed a spatial ring at Ling Han, saying, "There are 10,000 star stones inside. It's more than enough to compensate you." Truth be told, 10,000 star stones was indeed a huge sum of money. However, it was completely worthless when compared to a spot to enter the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. Moreover, they had already advanced to the Severing Mundane tier and obtained a limitless lifespan, so would it be difficult to earn some star stones? Ling Han chuckled as he accepted the spatial ring. An understanding expression spread across Zhao Peng's face. This was just as he had expected. In his eyes, Ling Han didn't have any background at all. Instead, he was only here because Fu Gaoyun held him in high regard. As such, he didn't have any confidence at all. After giving him a fright, he would definitely become as obedient as could be. Sure enough, Ling Han yielded before he could even voice his threats. What an absolute coward. I'll happily accept this welcome gift. Now, piss off. Ling Han waved his hand to dismiss Zhao Peng. What? Zhao Peng faltered upon hearing this. He thought that he had heard wrong, and he asked, "What did you say?" "Piss off, you understand?" Ling Han smiled and continued, "Here, I'll teach you. First, place your hands on the ground. After that, place your head on the ground. With that done, you can push with your legs and succeed in rolling forward. With your intelligence, it shouldn't be too hard to learn this." Zhao Peng instantly exploded in rage. "Are you treating me as a retard? You think I don't know how to roll and piss off?" He was furious, and he immediately pointed at Ling Han, shouting, "Don't push me. I'm allowing you to piss off by yourself now. However, if you insist on receiving my help, you're the one who's going to end up suffering," Ling Han said in a calm voice as he took a sip of tea. Zhao Peng laughed in fury. This person was far too audacious. Not only was he refusing to cooperate with him, but he had even stolen his star stones. Where had his courage come from? "Ling Han, you're far too overconfident," he said with a cold chuckle. "I'll give you one final chance. Do as I say. Otherwise, your fate will be incredibly miserable." Ling Han smiled and said, "Same back to you. Don't bring trouble upon yourself." "Impudence!" Zhao Peng roared. He immediately lashed out, unable to contain his anger anymore. If Ling Han were replaced with the Empress, Zhao Peng definitely wouldn't dare to attack her, regardless of how furious he was. After all, she had easily defeated Jin Jiyu, a second Severance Elite, in a single strike. Thus, defeating him, a first Severance Elite, would be as easy as pie. However, could Ling Han also be that freakish? Ling Han sighed upon seeing this. There were always those who insisted on receiving a beating before they finally learned to become obedient. That being the case, he could only trouble himself to teach them some life lessons. "Pa!" He casually reached over and grabbed Zhao Peng's neck. He then lifted him up as if he were a baby chick. "Come, I'll help you piss off," Ling Han said as he tossed Zhao Peng into the distance. "Pa!" Zhao Peng was instantly thrown into the distance, with his momentum causing him to involuntarily roll forward. Zhao Peng rolled all the way to the entrance of the courtyard, and only then did he coincidentally come to a stop. He was both furious and humiliated, and he roared, "Where are my star stones? Since you're not cooperating with me, you've got to return my star stones, right?" Chapter 1774, Broken. Chapter 1774, Broken. "What star stones?" Ling Han asked casually. An expression of astonishment then spread across his face, and he said, "Perhaps you're referring to the welcome gift that you gave me just then? Say, oh, that's right. What's your name again?" He glanced at Zhao Peng, and he didn't give him an opportunity to speak before waving his hand and saying, "Forget about it. That's not important. Say, you're far too insincere. How can you ask for your welcome gift back?" "Fuck your sister." Zhao Peng felt so aggrieved that he wanted to cry. Ling Han had taken his star stones, and he had also tossed him into the distance and forced him to roll like a ball. Now, he was even saying that he had forgotten his name. How detestable. He hesitated for a moment before lowering his head and running away. After all, he definitely couldn't defeat Ling Han. However, could he allow this person with no background whatsoever to bully him? Zhao Peng? Did he truly think that the Zhao clan was mere decoration? He would return to gather reinforcements. Meanwhile, Ling Han couldn't care less. Regardless of whether he took Zhao Peng's star stones or not, Zhao Peng would definitely continue to target him anyway. Thus, he would simply treat these 10,000 star stones as payment for his trouble. He would continue to play this game with the Zhao clan. However, Zhao Peng definitely wasn't the only person who was planning to target him for the spot to enter the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. Moreover, there were definitely more people who wanted to target him because of his lack of background. Shortly after shooing Zhao Peng away, the servant returned to inform him that another visitor had come. The visitor was Fu Junyong. With the surname Fu, he was naturally a member of the Fu clan. However, there were far too many members in the Fu clan, and there were more so countless different branches. The branch that Fu Junyong belonged to wasn't valued much, so they naturally couldn't receive any spots to enter the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. As such, Fu Junyong could only rely on Fu Gaoyun. However, he wasn't strong enough, so he hadn't been able to achieve victory and obtain one of the 5 spots that had been up for grabs. That being the case, he decided to come here to seek Ling Han. This was obviously because he thought Ling Han would be easy to bully. Brother Ling. Fu Junyong greeted enthusiastically upon entering the hall. He was far more intelligent and sophisticated than Zhao Peng. After all, one couldn't strike a smiling person even if they were enraged. Thus, Ling Han smiled and said, "Brother Junyong." Fu Junyong refused to mention the spots to enter the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, yet he continued to talk about how incredibly dangerous and deadly the Mystery Realm was. His description was as if Ling Han would most definitely die if he dared to enter. Ling Han pretended to be astonished, and he asked, "Is it truly so dangerous?" "Indeed," Fu Junyong replied. He was delighted upon seeing this, and he immediately seized the opportunity to say, "Brother Ling, how about this? I should be slightly stronger than you, and the clan will also bestow upon me some treasures to protect myself. Why don't I enter the Mystery Realm in your stead? Rest assured, regardless of how many treasures I obtain, I'll give you 90% and only keep 10% for myself. After all, we're on such friendly terms." Holy fuck. This person is truly Blackheart. At least Zhao Peng still offered me 10,000 star stones. No matter what, that was still tangible wealth. However, this dude is trying to take my spot for nothing, giving me 90% and only keeping 10% for yourself? Do you think I'll believe you? At that time, what if you claim that you were extremely unfortunate and only managed to find 2 pieces of useless rock? How useful will your promise be then? Ling Han immediately rejected this offer, saying, "How can I agree to this? We feel like old friends already, so how can I allow Brother Junyong to risk your life for me? How can I accept the fruits of your hard work for nothing? I definitely can't agree to this." Fu Junyong couldn't help but look Ling Han up and down. Was he serious or not? If he were serious, then that would make him far too stupid. However, if he were acting, then his expression was far too realistic and convincing. Thus, he could only say, "Brother Ling, I already said, I'm slightly stronger than you, and I also have the support of the clan. Thus, it'll definitely be far safer for me to go in your stead." "Then that's even more the reason that I can't agree," Ling Han said in righteousness. "What if Brother Junyong gets wounded? What if Brother Junyong accidentally dies? At that time, what will happen to your wife? Won't she be violated by other men? What about your children? Won't they have to refer to other men as father? What if they're maltreated? What if there's no one to burn incense for you in the future?" Holy fuck. Your imagination is far too rich and far-fetched. I'm still alive and healthy, so is it really okay for you to curse me like that? However, Fu Junyong couldn't express his anger at this moment. After all, Ling Han was saying this out of care and concern. As such, he could only force himself to swallow these curses. He couldn't help but grimace. Ling Han was cursing him to die, Yet he still had to thank him for his concern. This caused him to feel incredibly vexed and stifled. He dazedly stared at Ling Han, and he started to ponder whether he had exaggerated the dangers of the hidden dragon mystery realm a little too much, so much so that he couldn't rein his fibs back in. Why is he so stupid? And why is he so incredibly righteous? Fu Juanyang's mouth went dry, and he said, "Brother Ling, listen to my advice. Don't act so rashly." Ling Han chuckled and replied, "If Brother Junyang insists, then it's not as if I can't agree." "It's finally come?" Delight spread across Fu Juanyang's face, and he said, "Please do continue, Brother Ling. What do you want me to do?" "Let's spar with each other. If you're stronger than me, I'll naturally let you go in my stead," Ling Han said. He couldn't be bothered toying with Fu Junyang anymore. "Wonderful. No problem." Fu Junyang replied with an eager nod. He was confident that he could defeat Ling Han with relative ease. After all, Ling Han was far too young. Moreover, he was most likely held in high regard by Fu Gaoyuan because of his supreme talent and his incredible potential, not his strength. The two of them faced off against each other in the courtyard. "Brother Ling, I'm going to attack now," Fu Junyang said with a solemn expression. He didn't want to severely wound Ling Han, as doing so would most likely kill his chances of obtaining the valuable spot. Ling Han nodded and said, "Then I'll use my full power." "Don't worry, use your full power. I'll also control my own power." Fu Juanyang's expression was as if everything were in his grasp. He made a pressing motion, and a huge number of veined patterns of the great Tao instantly materialized before him. Their might was absolutely astounding. As someone who was highly valued by Fu Gaoyuan, he was indeed fairly skilled and talented. Although Fu Junyang had only performed normal severances, he had been extremely close to performing flawless severances. However, no matter how close he had been, his severances were still just normal severances. As such, his battle prowess was naturally far inferior to those who had performed flawless severances. Ling Han replied with a simple punch. However, he purposefully condensed sweat on his forehead, making it seem as if he were exerting his full strength. Upon sensing the might of Ling Han's punch, a hint of disdain involuntarily spread across Fu Juanyang's face. This battle prowess was far too weak. What talent and potential had Fu Gaoyuan seen in him? Moreover, he had actually given him a spot to enter the hidden dragon mystery realm. Ling Han's fist arrived before him. Fu Junyang could feel a burst of power rushing over, yet he didn't think much of it. He was just about to unleash some power to block this strike. However, he suddenly discovered that although this punch was weak, the regulations contained within it were devastatingly powerful. These were terrifying regulations that he couldn't block at all. Raw power and regulations were both important aspects of one's battle prowess. Moreover, starting from the severing mundane tier, regulations would be the more important aspect. Generally speaking, however, cultivators wouldn't abandon their cultivation of power. As such, there was still a notion of measuring battle prowess using raw power. The stronger one's power, the stronger their regulations. That being the case, who would have expected Ling Han's weak-looking punch to contain such overwhelming regulations? Not good. Fu Junyang exclaimed in his mind. However, it was already too late to dodge. The regulations of the great Tao surged through his body. Pooh! He instantly spat a mouthful of blood, and his face also became as white as a sheet. Ling Han hurriedly dashed over and asked, "Aya, Brother Junyang, are you okay?" "I'm so sorry. I used too much power. I mistakenly thought that Brother Junyang was much stronger than me. However, who would have thought?" He continued to use his words to slap Fu Juanyang's face. At this moment, Fu Junyang truly wanted to die. How pitiful he was. He had been pummeled into spitting blood, yet he couldn't find any reason to explode in rage. It was he who had said that he would control his power, and it was he who had told Ling Han to use his full power. Thus, he had no option but to swallow this painful result. This was truly a case of Mr. Wang from next door. Fu Junyang had been completely screwed over. Chapter 1775, Southern Cup Rock Sunwater. Chapter 1775, Southern Cup, Rock, Sun, Water. Fu Junyong left in misery and dejection. The wounds that Ling Han had given him weren't the most important. He could fully recover from these wounds in a dozen or so days. However, the spot to enter the mystery realm. Anyhow, following Fu Junyong, several more people visited Ling Han to ask for the spot to enter the mystery realm. Some of them were relatively polite, and they were willing to use star stones, saintly medicines, or even cultivation techniques to exchange for this spot. However, there were also some who were incredibly arrogant, and they directly ordered Ling Han to yield his spot. When facing the former, Ling Han would also be polite and nicely ask them to leave. Facing the latter, however, Ling Han would directly beat them out of his residence. Pong! There was a violent shudder, and it was as if the entire courtyard were about to collapse. It finally stabilized after a moment, and it was also at this time that a cold and eerie voice suddenly traveled over. "Where's Ling Han? Get the hell out here to greet me." There was a terrifying might in this voice, and it definitely didn't belong to someone at the severing mundane tier. Instead, it belonged to an elite at the dividing soul tier. Ling Han stood up and started to fly out. At this moment, a young man was standing before the entrance to his residence with his hands clasped behind his back. Although Ling Han regarded him as a youth, judging by his tumultuous vitality, he was at least tens of billions of years old. In fact, he might even be hundreds of billions of years old. His youthful appearance simply signified that he had severed the mundane at a relatively young age. Thus, his appearance had been locked into one of youth. In other words, he would appear young forever. In order to make themselves appear more mighty and dignified, some elites would purposefully age their appearance. However, this person clearly hadn't done so. Anyhow, there was also another person standing behind this youth. This was someone who Ling Han recognized. Fu Zhengtong. "Oh? You lost to me, so you've brought a dividing soul tier elite over to redeem your pride. What a sore loser. Perhaps you'll run back sobbing and ask for help from your elders every time you're defeated by someone in the future." "You're Ling Han?" the dividing soul tier elite asked as he gazed at Ling Han with a cold expression. His name was Fu Siyuan, and he was an elder in the branch that Fu Zhengtong belonged to. In reality, there was a difference of many generations between them. However, because everyone had lived for so long, people usually ignored how many generations existed between them, and they all referred to those of the older generations as elder. Ling Han glanced at him, but he remained silent. Fu Zhengtong couldn't help but rebuke. "My senior is asking you a question. How is this brat so audacious?" Ling Han wore an indifferent expression, and he said, "Oh, so he's actually talking to me? Heh. What kind of attitude is this?" There were flames of anger in Fu Siyuan's mind. How was there such an ignorant and naive junior? When those at the severing mundane tier saw those at the dividing soul tier, shouldn't they all piss themselves in fright? His voice was solemn, and he said, "You used underhanded methods to defeat Zhengtong. So now, I want you two to engage in a fair battle again." Underhanded? Ling Han chuckled coldly in his mind. How much of a sore loser was this Fu Zhengtong? He had actually made up such a *TTY excuse? Moreover, if Fu Zhengtong truly wanted to redeem his pride, he could have simply returned here by himself. Why bring a dividing soul tier elite with him? Was this not to frighten Ling Han? Did he dare to win? If he won, he would need to face the rage of a dividing soul tier elite. In fact, Fu Siyuan might even interfere with their battle and directly target Ling Han. Most of the students in this academy were only at the severing mundane tier, so they most likely wouldn't be able to detect Fu Siyuan's underhanded techniques. They were blatantly bullying Ling Han. "Fine, then let's battle again," Ling Han said indifferently. Fu Siyuan's and Fu Zhengtong's expression was as if they had already expected this outcome. In their eyes, Ling Han naturally couldn't reject the request of a dividing soul tier elite. Meanwhile, Fu Zhengtong also felt like he had lost unfairly. His battle prowess was no weaker than Ling Han's, and it was because of Ling Han's high-level pseudo-celestial tool that he had been riddled with wounds. As such, they would both be banned from using pseudo-celestial tools during the following battle. However, He had received a precious treasure from his elder, and this would help him obtain definite victory. His battle with Ling Han didn't simply represent himself and Ling Han. Instead, it also represented the conflict and competition between Fu Gaoyun and Fu Tonghai, two of the potential successors of the Fu clan. The more outstanding a potential successor, the more powerful elites they would naturally attract to their alliance. Similarly, the quality and strength of a potential successor's followers would also directly reflect their influence and power. After leaving the courtyard, Fu Siyuan unleashed a deafening roar that shook the surroundings. It wasn't long before people started to fly over. The more time that passed, the more people that gathered. They had all been attracted here by the loud commotion. "What's going on?" everyone asked. They were confused as to what was happening. Fu Siyuan immediately explained that this was a simple sparring match. A sparring match? Then why do they need a dividing soul tier elite? Everyone watched on in curiosity. Meanwhile, Ling Han faced off against Fu Zhengtong. "Ling Han, you relied on your pseudo-celestial tool to achieve a slight advantage over me last time. This time, however, we'll simply compete using our celestial techniques. We'll spar using our true strength," Fu Zhengtong said. His face was filled with indignance. He truly believed that he had lost because of Ling Han's pseudo-celestial tool. Thus, he would decisively turn the tables and achieve victory this time. Ling Han shrugged his shoulders and said, "All right, so are you going to fight or not? If you want to fight, then stop uttering nonsense. Otherwise, your words will come back to bite you when you lose again." Fu Zhengtong humphed upon hearing this. Wang. With a single thought, a water dragon surged out from his body. This was a crystalline and semi-transparent dragon whose scales were all formed from the symbols of the Great Tao. Its might was utterly terrifying. "Southern Cup Rock Sun Water," someone immediately exclaimed in astonishment. After transforming and developing for hundreds of millions of years, this is the formation of intelligence and form of the Great Tao of Water. Gasp! Unleashing something like this? Southern Cup Rock Sun Water. This was a spiritual matter nurtured and birthed by heaven and earth. In essence, this was an extremely nutritious and beneficial matter. If a cultivator refined it, not only would their origin power rise by an explosive amount, but even their control over water element regulations would improve by a significant degree. However, such precious treasures could only be discovered by chance. In fact, even Celestial King tiers couldn't necessarily obtain such treasures. Moreover, the Southern Cup Rock Sun Water could still continue to evolve. It could still develop a spirit and gain awareness, thereby becoming a true life form. This was quite terrifying. According to rumors, the most powerful of these spiritual matters could even reach the Ascending Origin tier. This was only a single major tier below the Celestial King tier. If these spiritual matters advanced to the Celestial King tier, they wouldn't be spiritual matters anymore. Instead, they would become source power. For example, ancestral flames and source water. Thus, everyone was stunned upon seeing the Southern Cup Rock Sun Water that Fu Zhengtong had unleashed, especially since it had already developed intelligence. No, this Southern Cup Rock Sun Water doesn't have enough spiritual awareness yet. It doesn't seem like it's developed a true life, a sharp-eyed person immediately said. It was most likely captured by an elite while it was forming intelligence and awareness. They then disturbed the process, resulting in it having a spirit, but not enough spiritual awareness. Even so, this is still Southern Cup Rock Sun Water that has developed a spirit. Its power and might is simply astounding. Fu Zhengtong was brimming with pride and haughtiness. An ancestor of his branch had coincidentally obtained this Southern Cup Rock Sun Water a very long time ago. However, few people knew about this. If he hadn't been humiliated so greatly, and if it weren't because of his lack of confidence against Ling Han, his ancestor definitely wouldn't have let him borrow this precious treasure. Right now, he was unleashing this precious treasure to obtain victory in one fell swoop. The water dragon roared, unleashing an astounding might into the surroundings. It was at least at the dividing soul tier. How would Ling Han resist? Everyone shook their heads upon seeing this. To say nothing of severing mundane tier cultivators, even elites at the yang soul of the dividing soul tier wouldn't be able to rival this Southern Cup rock sun water. However, there was a strange expression on Ling Han's face. This was because a wisp of power had been aroused inside him. The Shining Source Water. This was one of the 9 great source waters of the celestial realm. It was the source of all water, and it was the mother of all water. Right now, the Shining Source Water was releasing a feeling of greed, wanted to consume the water dragon. Because the Shining Source Water had already become Ling Han's source power, he could clearly determine that he possessed the ability to consume the water dragon. In other words, he possessed the ability to consume the Southern Cup rock sun water. This was because he belonged to a higher level, thereby allowing him to comprehensively suppress this spiritual matter. Chapter 1776, Stealing. Chapter 1776, Stealing. Is it really all right to pick on people like this? Aren't you afraid that you'll give birth to a son with no *shoal? A voice that was filled with disdain suddenly said. Everyone looked over, only to see a beautiful young woman walking out from the crowd. This was none other than Situ Xiaojun. In fact, one could already determine the owner of this voice without looking over. After all, few women spoke as boldly as this. Lady Xiaojun, everyone immediately said in greeting upon seeing Situ Xiaojun. Situ Xiaojun was only at the first severance, yet her grandpa was a mighty 3-star alchemist. Thus, this instantly elevated her status by several notches. Even the clan leader of the Fu clan would have to treat a 3-star alchemist with respect. It could be said that only Situ Xiaojun could pick on others, and no one else could pick on her. Otherwise, they would be seeking death. Thus, her interference instantly caused Fu Siyuan to frown. This was a mini-ancestor. Little girl, why have you run over here? Fu Siyuan asked with a chuckle. Although he was adopting the position of an elder, he was speaking politely and acting as friendly as he could. Do you have the right to call me little girl? Situ Xiaojun said with a sneer. Old geezer, why don't you take a piss and look at your own reflection? Your face is crooked and repulsive, so stop trying to act all friendly with me. I'm not familiar with you at all. Fu Siyuan instantly exploded with rage. He had heard about Situ Xiaojun's evil reputation before, yet only after encountering her did he finally realize just how toxic her tongue truly was. However, he didn't dare to unleash his fury. After all, who didn't know that she was Situ Tang's only granddaughter? If anyone dared to pick on her, regardless of whether they were in the right or not, that old man would definitely rush over to personally battle with them. Moreover, it didn't matter how powerful he was. Facing a 3-star alchemist who dared to touch even a single hair of his. If anyone dared to attack him, the clan leader and the Fu clan would definitely rush over to personally punish them. Why, you little girl? Fu Siyuan said with a forced smile. He waved his hand and continued, All right, enough with the nonsense. This is a fair and evenly matched battle. Fair? Fair? Situ Xiaojun said with a cold sneer. Although her tongue was toxic, she was someone who had an overwhelming sense of justice and righteousness. Thus, she would directly speak her mind if she came across anything unjust. She would never hide her emotions. Ling Han, follow me, she said. Let me see who dares to target you. Ling Han couldn't help but feel exasperated. He was a huge fan of Situ Xiaojun's sense of justice and righteousness. However, he still wanted to consume that water dragon. Yet, his battle with Fu Zhongtong had been forcefully interrupted by her. What could he do now? There's no need. This is a simple sparring match, he said with a wave of his hand. The Shining Source Water was releasing an increasingly powerful urge to consume the Southern Cup rock sun water. This was his source power, so in a sense, it also represented the desires of his own body. Situ Xiaojun faltered upon hearing this, and she said, You stupid fool, that's the Southern Cup rock sun water. Moreover, it's already developed intelligence. Did you think it was just an ordinary celestial treasure? Nonsense. I only want to consume it because it's the Southern Cup rock sun water. Ling Han smiled and said, I've never seen such a matter before, so I want to experience its power. You dumb sea asterisk and T. Situ Xiaojun said as she flipped the bird at Ling Han. So be it. Do whatever you want. I can't be bothered anymore. After saying this, she ran away in frustration. Everyone was puzzled upon seeing this. Ling Han had the support of Situ Xiaojun, so why didn't he seize the opportunity to decline the battle? Perhaps he was truly a fool? Even Fu Siyuan was slightly confused upon seeing this. He refused to believe that a severing mundane tier cultivator could be so stupid. However, no matter how he racked his brains, he still couldn't figure out how Ling Han would possibly rival the Southern Cup Rock Sun Water. Perhaps he possesses powerful spiritual matters such as the Yaksha Fire or Sixth Heaven Thunder. No way. What a joke. Fu Siyuan pondered for a moment before deciding not to stop Ling Han. They definitely had to win their face back. Otherwise, their branch would suffer great humiliation. Fu Zhengtong roared loudly before charging at Ling Han. He couldn't suppress his anger any longer. Boom! The water dragon howled in fury. This was a spiritual matter of heaven and earth, and when it grew up, it could even reach the ascending origin tier. Although it was wounded now, it still possessed the might of a dividing soul tier elite. Moreover, it possessed the great Tao of water that one could investigate and comprehend. As such, this was definitely a paramount treasure. However, it was a shame that it was only at the dividing soul tier, meaning that one couldn't rely on it to comprehend the mystical nature of the immortal palace tier. Otherwise, it would be even more valuable. On the flip side, however, Fu Jingtong wouldn't have been able to borrow this treasure if it had been truly flawless and able to reach the ascending origin tier. After all, such a powerful treasure would definitely attract ascending origin tier forces who might even try to forcefully steal it. The water dragon was unstoppable as it swooped over. Ling Han dashed aside to dodge, and he started to engage in battle with Fu Zhengtong. However, the water dragon was far too powerful. After all, it was at the dividing soul tier, and it was perhaps even above the Yang soul. It had potentially reached the Yin soul, or even the Earth soul. Thus, it was inevitable that Ling Han was occasionally struck by the water dragon. Shockingly, however, it was as if Ling Han weren't affected by this at all. He remained calm and composed regardless of how the water dragon wreaked havoc in his surroundings. It was as if the water dragon weren't a dividing soul tier elite, but rather a measly Genesis tier cultivator. Gasp! Everyone was transfixed with shock and disbelief. How could they accept this? Meanwhile, Ling Han was secretly feeling elated. Each time he clashed with the water dragon, he would pluck a wisp of its power of regulations, transforming this into his own power. During this process, his origin power would continue to rise at a steady rate. To Celestials, the accumulation of origin power was already relatively unimportant. However, this was still something that needed to be accumulated over time. As such, why would Ling Han not accept this free origin power? Of course, his most important task was still to strengthen his source power. If Ling Han wanted to comprehend the power of regulations, he could use his own source power to comprehend the regulations of water and the regulations of fire. After all, both of these source powers were already at the Celestial King tier. Would the difficulty of comprehending heaven and earth be equivalent to the difficulty of comprehending one's own power and body? Thus, it could be said that before reaching the Celestial King tier, Ling Han's cultivation speed would be tens of thousands of times quicker than that of other cultivators. This was inevitable. After all, who else would be fortunate enough to refine a source power of heaven and earth? Even when considering celestial kings, few could achieve such a feat. Incredible. This feels absolutely incredible. As they collided, Ling Han continued to extract the water dragon's power. It appeared as if they were engaged in an intense battle, yet in reality, the water dragon was continuously becoming weaker. If the Southern Cup Rock Sunwater had truly developed intelligence, it definitely wouldn't have battled against Ling Han head-on like it was doing now. After all, would it be that foolish? Unfortunately, however, it had been captured by the ancestor while it was at the most critical moment of developing intelligence. That being the case, it could only foolishly battle against Ling Han. It continued to weaken, and Ling Han continued to feel elated. He was brimming with origin power. In fact, if he didn't advance, his dantian would be too small to contain any more heavenly bodies and any more origin power. Stop! Fu Siyuan suddenly shouted. His brows knitted into a frown, and he said to Fu Zhengtong, "Attack me with your full power." Fu Zhengtong faltered upon hearing this, yet he immediately came to his senses. Indeed, something seemed off. How could the Southern Cup rock sun water be so weak? It couldn't even suppress a measly severing mundane tier cultivator? He brandished the water dragon and attacked Fu Siyuan with his full power. Boom! The water dragon radiated with a powerful might as it gathered the water particles of heaven and earth. However, Fu Siyuan was astonished as he blocked this attack. Although the water dragon's attack appeared powerful, in reality, its destructive power was only at the early stage of the fourth severance. He came to a sudden realization. No wonder Ling Han could rival the power of this water dragon. As it turned out, this was a fake water dragon. Southern Cup Rock Sun Water. Chapter 1777. Invitation from Young Master Hai. Chapter 1777. Invitation from Young Master Hai. Ha 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 ha. The onlookers all roared with laughter. After causing so much commotion and giving them such high hopes for the ensuing battle, Fu Zhengtong had immediately become limp and uncompetitive just like that. Meanwhile, Fu Siyuan's expression was as dark as could be. What in the world was going on? Perhaps Fu Zhengtong had released the Southern Cup rock sun water for too long, so it was leaking air? Humph! He flicked his sleeves in frustration. If he directly interfered and suppressed Ling Han, others would accuse him of picking on the weak. Sure, there were dividing soul tier elites in Fu Tonghai's branch, but were there no dividing soul tier elites in Fu Gaoyan's branch? The Fu clan had their rules battles between the followers of different potential leaders were strictly limited to those at the severing mundane tier. If elites above this cultivation level participated, they would be severely punished by the clan. Let's go, Fu Siyuan said as he turned around. Fu Zhengtong hurriedly followed behind him. He was no stronger than Ling Han, and if he took Ling Han's pseudo-celestial tool into account, he could only hope to achieve victory if he used the Southern Cup rock sun water. Otherwise, how could he avenge his defeat? He dejectedly left with Fu Siyuan. A smile spread across Ling Han's face. He had obtained a huge yield. He returned to his courtyard and immediately entered the Black Tower. He then channeled his cultivation technique under the reincarnation tree, refining the brimming origin power into his flesh and bones. Right now, his accumulation of origin power had already reached the peak stage of the second severance. However, his comprehension of regulations was slightly inferior. As such, he was still unable to advance, meaning that he could only patiently wait. 3 different source powers intertwined inside his body: water, fire, and lightning. The water and fire element source powers were both nurtured and birthed by heaven and earth. Meanwhile, the lightning element source power was obtained from heavenly tribulation fluid. As such, it was fundamentally weaker than the 2 other source powers. That being the case, the fire and water element source powers occupied 90% of the territory, while the lightning element source power only occupied 10% of the territory. Ling Han observed the water element source power. After absorbing most of the essence of the Southern Cup rock sun water, this water element source power had also grown larger by a tiny bit. However, because its level was already so high, this growth seemed to be relatively insignificant. Anyhow, a tiny bit of growth was better than nothing. Perhaps it had only been able to help him reach the first heaven of the Celestial King tier before, yet it was now able to help him reach the second heaven of the Celestial King tier. Of course, this was thinking too far ahead. Ling Han continued to refine the brimming origin power into his blood, flesh, and bones. This was the process of cultivating and tempering his body. Accumulation of origin power would become relatively unimportant after reaching the severing mundane tier, so those who were at this cultivation level would often use their origin power to temper their body. After advancing to the severing mundane tier, it could be said that everyone would become someone who practiced body arts. The only difference was how powerful their physique was. Ling Han stopped and shook his head after refining his origin power for a few hours. Even though there were two source powers of heaven and earth within his body, and even though he had the help of the reincarnation tree, it was still incredibly difficult to obtain enough comprehension to advance to the third severance. He would need to wait for at least 1,000 more years. Was this slow? Not at all. For example, Mao Dai was a renowned prodigy, yet it had still taken him a whopping 300 million years to advance from the early stage of the first severance to the peak stage of the third severance. Was it possible to advance faster? Of course. One could ingest celestial medicines. Otherwise, one could also enter celestial bath pools like the one in the Han clan. By doing so, one would naturally obtain a steady flow of comprehension. As long as they weren't a fool, their cultivation would naturally rise at an explosive rate. Ling Han sighed with emotion. He already owned numerous paramount treasures, yet if he wanted to rapidly increase his cultivation, he would still need to enter all kinds of ancient sites to look for rare opportunities. He was under far too much pressure. Otherwise, advancing by one minor level every 1,000 years was something that even young king tiers like Changsun Liang and Fu Gaoyun would accept with glee. They definitely wouldn't view this speed as slow. Meanwhile, Zhao Peng had sought help from a powerful figure of the Zhao clan, and they had desired to heap pressure onto Ling Han. However, Situ Xiaojun informed the two 3-star alchemists about this, and they both became incredibly displeased. They immediately complained to the clan leader of the Fu clan, and as a result, the Zhao clan was treated as an example and severely admonished by him. Only at this moment did everyone come to a sudden realization. It was untrue that Ling Han didn't have a powerful background. Instead, he had the support of two 3-star alchemists. Upon learning of this, no one dared to provoke Ling Han anymore. At the same time, it also caused many members of the Fu clan to think highly of Fu Gaoyun. By obtaining the support of Ling Han, he had essentially obtained the support of two great alchemists. This was unfathomably important to Fu Gaoyun's aim of stabilizing his position as a potential successor. In fact, it was also a critical relationship that might help him become the only successor of the Fu clan. Several undecided branches and subordinate forces immediately started to lean toward Fu Gaoyun. In turn, this placed huge pressure on the three other potential successors. Fu Gaoyun was naturally overjoyed. He had only become acquaintances with Ling Han because he appreciated his personality. At that time, he hadn't known that Ling Han was also a talented alchemist who would bring him such immense help. In order to thank Ling Han, he became even more enthusiastic as he helped him search for level 20 godly metal. At the same time, he also ordered more people to search for the whereabouts of the Rock Palace. With this significant increase in effort, it wasn't long before they obtained some results. Godly metal could be obtained as long as one had enough money. Meanwhile, news about the Rock Palace was also delivered over from the distance. This news had come from a city that was located near the boundless sea. It had come from a merchant who had traveled to the western celestial realm. Indeed, Ling Han was currently located in the eastern celestial realm, while the Rock Palace was situated in the distant western celestial realm. Ling Han was beside himself with emotion upon hearing this news. However, crossing the boundless sea was an incredibly dangerous matter. There were countless immortal beasts in the sea. In fact, there were even celestial king-tier immortal beasts in the sea. With Ling Han's current strength, attempting to cross the sea would be equivalent to seeking death. He had to follow a merchant team. In other words, he had to pay a huge sum of money to cross the sea. However, Ling Han wasn't worried about this cost. Instead, he was worried that money alone wouldn't be enough. No one could guarantee that crossing the sea would be safe. Some powerful forces had opened set routes in the sea, yet even so, they would still tell their passengers that they were liable for their own safety if anything untoward were to happen. If that were to occur, Ling Han would have no option but to seek refuge in the Black Tower. Perhaps he might even be met with grave dangers when he poked his head out again. After mulling over this for a long time, Ling Han decided to cross the sea after he reached at least the dividing soul tier. Doing so would increase his safety by a significant amount. Moreover, he had also received immense help from Fu Gaoyun, so it would be incredibly discourteous of him to leave at this moment. After all, Departing at this moment would definitely lead to the collapse of Fu Gaoyun's newly obtained support. Ling Han wasn't someone who would leave things unfinished. Coincidentally, he also wanted to see if he could obtain anything during his trip to the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. If he could find a method to rapidly advance to the third severance, advancing to the Dividing Soul tier wouldn't be a distant matter anymore. Right now, he was waiting for the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm to open. Meanwhile, elites would occasionally go to the Heavenly Dragon Academy to give lectures on Tao. However, most of them were only at the Dividing Soul tier. It was extremely rare for Immortal Palace tier elites to give lectures. Ling Han would occasionally attend these lectures, and this was mainly to gain an understanding of the Dividing Soul tier. Similar to the Severing Mundane tier, one would also need to go to designated locations in the Celestial Realm to advance to the Dividing Soul tier. Otherwise, it was essentially impossible to advance to the Dividing Soul tier. Anyhow, people were forgetful beings, and it wasn't long before the commotion caused by Ling Han quickly died down. After all, he had kept an extremely low profile afterward. Moreover, no one dared to provoke him anyway. Right now, there was someone else whom people would involuntarily curse when they mentioned him. This was none other than the large black dog that wore a pair of iron underwear. This large black dog was far too detestable, and he loved to screw people over left and right. He would commit any evils that he could think of. Moreover, he was extremely slippery, and no one could hope to capture him at all. However, it was also because of this that there was an air of mystery about him. He had already become a legend of the academy. To this, Ling Han could only shed a few drops of cold sweat. 1 month later, Ling Han received a visitor. Young Master Han, this humble servant is called Lu Huayu. This was a stunningly beautiful woman. Moreover, upon seeing her seductive eyes, Ling Han felt a strong urge to leap over and push her down, and then furiously enter her body. Ling Han's heart shuddered. He had a breathtakingly beautiful wife in the Empress, so what woman could still make him lose his control? This woman had practiced charm techniques, so each of her movements was as charming and seductive as could be. Young Master Hai sends his invitation, she said in a sweet voice. Chapter 1778, Persuasion. Chapter 1778, Persuasion. Young Master Hai? Fu Tonghai? Ling Han came to a sudden understanding. Because of him, Fu Gaoyun was now enjoying an ever-increasing amount of support. Moreover, having the support of 2 3-star alchemists was far too mighty and impressive. It was also because of this that Fu Tonghai was unable to remain calm. If this continued, Fu Gaoyun would definitely become the legitimate successor to the position of clan leader. Ling Han smiled and replied, I'm not familiar with Fu Tonghai, am I? How are you not? Lu Huayu asked with a charming and dainty smile. Her smile was as beautiful as 100 flowers in full blossom. Moreover, her charm techniques were extremely high level, and they didn't rely on her selling her body or physically seducing others. Just her movements and her smiles were enough to charm one to the extreme. As long as you can converse, there will naturally be something to talk about, she said. She twirled her hair, revealing a small portion of her smooth and jade-like ear. However, she immediately released her hair to cover it again, and this would make one's mind become itchy with thirst. Ling Han shook his head, saying, yeah, maybe not. Young Master Han, are you trying to make things difficult for this humble servant? Lu Huayu said with an aggrieved expression. Her expression not only elicited sympathy, but it would also rile one's lust. Upon seeing her expression, one would feel a strong urge to grab her body and toy with her beautiful and voluptuous curves. However, Ling Han was completely unfazed. Lu Huayu's charm techniques were indeed powerful, and they perfectly complemented the natural charm of her body. However, he faced the Empress every day, so how could he not endure this kind of temptation? He smiled and said, Lady Lu, please return. Young Master Han, are you afraid that your 2 wives will be jealous? Lu Huayu asked with a silvery laugh. She covered her dainty mouth and she continued, with young Master Han's godly talent, it won't be excessive even if you have 200 wives, to say nothing of 2 wives. Moreover, Her eyes were filled with seduction, and she said, "We still haven't done anything yet." Her words were filled with ambiguity and temptation. They still hadn't done anything yet. So did this mean that they would do something later? Ling Han waved his hand, saying, "Servants, see this visitor away." Lu Huayu hurriedly dashed over and exclaimed, "Young Master Han." She grabbed his arm and lightly swayed it. She then leaned her slender body onto him, and she said, "Don't be so heartless. If it's necessary, this humble servant will do anything that you ask." Her eyes were filled with pity, and her lips were as red as flames. It was as if she could be easily sparked by others. Ling Han could clearly feel the firmness of Lu Huayu's breast through his arm, yet he still resolutely pulled it away from her embrace. "Show this guest the door." "Young Master Han," Lu Huayu exclaimed. Her expression faltered, and she immediately wiped the charming expression from her face. At this moment, her expression was filled with seriousness, and it was as if she were an inviolable maiden. This transformation was far too quick, so much so that Ling Han could barely come to his senses. "Young Master Han, as the saying goes, it's in man's nature to strive for better," Lu Huayu said with a smile. She was still smiling, yet her smile didn't give off a shred of charm anymore. The transformation of her aura was simply astounding. As the saying also goes, a fine fowl perches only on a fine tree. Although Fu Gaoyan's reputation is rising, how can he compare to the profound potential and experience of young Master Hai? If young Master Han allies with young Master Hai, that will be an alliance between giants. At that time, the position of future clan leader will definitely go to young Master Hai. Moreover, young Master Hai has also agreed to designate young Master Han as his first subordinate force at that time. In fact, young Master Hai will even allow you to build your own city. Building his own city, this was quite a hefty promise. Of course, Fu Tonghai's promises were one matter, and whether he fulfilled them was another matter altogether. Making empty promises was extremely easy and common. There was definitely no shortage of people who went back on their word. Anyhow, Lu Huayu's words were extremely colorful and extravagant. Ling Han grinned and said, "I'm destined to become a celestial king in the future, so are you perhaps underestimating my value?" Lu Huayu was stunned upon hearing this. She had come across overconfident people before, and she had also come across those who made arrogant claims because they wanted to impress her. Compared to Ling Han, however, their claims were absolutely pathetic. Becoming a celestial king? Gasp! Celestial kings were the most powerful beings in the celestial realm. Just a single shadow of theirs could crush heaven and earth. These were paramount beings the prodigies and king tiers could only look up to. In fact, even as supremely talented as he was, Fu Tonghai only dared to set a goal of reaching the immortal palace tier. Perhaps his luck would be explosive, and he might even have a chance to advance to the ascending origin tier in the future. However, the celestial king tier? He wouldn't dare to even dream of this. Even among holy sons and holy daughters of top-notch sects who had limitless amounts of resources to burn, only fewer than 1 in 10,000 of them would ultimately succeed in becoming a celestial king. Celestials possessed a limitless lifespan, and celestial kings were more so the most powerful beings in the world. According to rumors, they could extinguish their immortal's tribulation with a wave of their hand. These beings were invincible and undying. Even so, only extremely few of them existed in the world. Why was this? This was because it was far too difficult to become a celestial king. Perhaps a new celestial king would only appear once every 100 billion years or 1 trillion years. Thus, Lu Huayu would have simply chuckled in reply if Ling Han had made any other bold claim. However, claiming that he would become a celestial king? She couldn't laugh even if she wanted to. In the celestial realm, celestial kings represented paramount might and invincibility. If one couldn't reach this height, then they could only gaze up in respect and reverence. Lu Huayu faltered for a long while before eventually stammering, "Young Master Han, what an incredible aspiration." However, her words definitely weren't that of praise. Ling Han was only a measly first severance junior, and he only had the support of 2 3-star alchemists. Yet, He was actually boasting that he would become a celestial king. If word of this spread, others would definitely treat him as if he were an utter fool. Ling Han's voice was calm, and he said, "If Fu Tonghai can help me reach the celestial king tier, I won't mind going over to meet him. Otherwise, don't waste my time." Holy **T. Lu Huayu almost slapped him in the face. If Fu Tonghai knew how to become a celestial king, would he still give a toss about becoming the clan leader of the Fu clan? 100 million positions of clan leader wouldn't be worth the position of celestial king. She was truly rendered speechless. When others talked business, they all asked for exorbitant benefits while eventually settling for decent prices. However, Ling Han's request was simply astronomical. How could she reply to him? "Then, this humble servant will ask for young Master Hai's instructions," Lu Huayu said. She finally stood up to leave, and her expression was slightly flustered. This was the first time that she had become so flustered before a man, and this was also the first time that she had failed to convince her target. This was a crushing blow, and she couldn't help but suspect that her charm had weakened. 2 hours later, another person came to visit. This person was none other than Fu Tonghai, one of the 4 potential successors of the Fu clan. He was a charming man, and he was brimming with the demeanor of a king tier. Women would definitely be attracted by him, and men would definitely be impressed by him. "I'm Fu Tonghai," he introduced with a loud laugh as he entered Ling Han's courtyard. Ling Han nodded in reply, saying, "Brother Hai." "Brother Ling, you're a man of great aspirations, and coincidentally, so am I. Why don't we team up to build a beautiful future?" There was eager anticipation on Fu Tonghai's face as he gazed at Ling Han, and his warm enthusiasm was such that he could easily soften others and cause them to impulsively agree to his requests. It was no wonder that even a seductively charming woman like Lu Huayu was willing to serve him. His demeanor and presence were truly outstanding. Chapter 1779, Fu Tonghai. Chapter 1779, Fu Tonghai. Ling Han looked at Fu Tonghai again. If he was being honest, this man indeed had a very strong personal charisma only, then would he be able to easily gather the hearts of others. If Ling Han was not a man that was determined to become the strongest in this world, there really might be a possibility that he would be moved and follow this man and answer his every beck and call, serving him faithfully. However, his aspirations were higher than the heavens, so how could he possibly become someone else's follower? Even in the case of Fu Gaoyun, his relation with Ling Han was only that of friends, and not the relation between a superior and subordinate. But who would believe that? Someone in a superior position had no need for friends. Even if they treated someone very well for the sake of winning their loyalty, at the essence, that was still treating the latter as a subordinate, and not as someone who was their equal. Fu Tonghai could not see through this. Thus, he wished to recruit Ling Han at all costs, yet did not know that this could not possibly succeed, and would only cause dislike to sprout in Ling Han's heart. Ling Han smiled calmly. "I am a man with no great ambitions, and only wish to spend my life peacefully. I am afraid I can only disappoint Brother Hai's expectations." "Utter crap. What were your words to Lu Huayu? Weren't you planning to become a celestial king? And now you've become a man with no great ambitions? Whom are you trying to deceive?" Fu Tonghai's expression involuntarily darkened. Faced with such a stubborn guy like Ling Han, he also felt weary. But Ling Han was too crucial and directly influenced the inclinations of 2 great alchemists. If he could not manage to get Ling Han over to his side, then it might really be impossible to stop Fu Gaoyun from ascending to the position of the patriarch. It definitely couldn't happen. He tried persuading him again, promised rich rewards, and even used Lu Huayu as his bargaining chip. As long as Ling Han nodded, he could consider gifting such an enchanting, seductive beauty to Ling Han as his concubine. Ling Han's heart involuntarily became filled with disdain. Being able to treat a woman, especially a subordinate that had admired him so long, as a good to be gifted to others meant this person's nature was truly cold. In Fu Tonghai's eyes, there was nothing that was as important as the position of the patriarch. For the sake of rising to this position, there was nothing he could not sacrifice or give up. That was because he could get anything that he had given up 1,000 or 10,000 times back in future. Now, Fu Tonghai could give Lu Huayu to him, and in future, he could also take her back. In fact, if he had other daughters, wives, or the sort, he could take them as well because he could already get rid of him when he was no longer useful. Originally, Ling Han had no intention to have any kind of relations with him, and now his heart was filled with dislike for him. He calmly stated, "I am a little tired, please return." Fu Tonghai's expression became incredibly dark in a flash. He had never been dismissed like this straight to his face. Usually, he would be the one who would be ending a conversation, waving a hand to dismiss others, but now it was he that was being dismissed by another in this manner. It should be known that no matter how impressive you were still just a dog of the Fu clan. This point was applicable to all the subordinate clans and subjects of the Fu clan. Even great alchemists like Situ Tang and Xiang Yin were no exception. Though Fu clan presently treated these two with incomparable respect, and even the Lord Patriarch had to carefully accompany them, the moment the essential profits of the Fu clan were involved, they would definitely give them up without the slightest hesitation. "I've just given you a few compliments, and you really think that you are someone important?" Fu Tonghai smirked coldly inside his heart. This guy had to have been horribly spoilt by Fu Gaoyun. He really had no idea just how much Fu Gaoyun had sacrificed to be able to recruit this guy under his banner. He immediately made his decision. He would definitely investigate Fu Gaoyun's accounts. If he had sacrificed the benefits of the clan just for the sake of having Ling Han by his side, then he would report him. If it was serious, Fu Gaoyun's status as heir would immediately be removed. Additionally, he looked at Ling Han with a smile and asked, "Brother Han, you are going to the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm as well, right?" Ling Han nodded and said, "Correct. I have been there before, so why don't I tell you about it first, Brother Han? There are many dangers in this Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, and the slightest carelessness could lead to one losing his life. Thus, be careful, very careful." He clapped a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, seeming as if he was giving advice to Ling Han, when in truth, his words were filled with threat. The Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm was too dangerous. Every time it opened, the number of people who died inside were uncountable. You are but a mere second severance, so it would be a very normal thing for you to die inside. Ling Han chuckled. Since this guy was already planning to turn hostile, he did not want to bother to keep up appearances either. He waved him off. "I have always been a fortunate man, so there is no need for you to worry about me. Then, pray that you have good luck." Fu Tonghai turned around to leave, his expression becoming incredibly cold and sinister in an instant. He had already decided that he would have his subordinates put all effort into hunting down Ling Han and killing him after they had entered into the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. In any case, it was a mystery realm. As long as there were no eyewitnesses, who cared if there were a few deaths? Furthermore, Bei Shiming was on poor terms with this person as well. Previously, he had even wanted to make use of him to teach Ling Han a lesson. If they had entered into the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, how could he keep himself from making a move on Ling Han with such a good chance in front of him? There were too many elites in the lunar sect. Though some of them had not become holy sons and holy daughters, their talent was extremely high, and they had cultivated for who knew how many hundreds of millions of years in the severing mundane tier, hoping to be well prepared. Anyways, there was no longer any limit to their lifespan after advancing into the severing mundane tier, and with how long the path of cultivation was, there was absolutely no need to compete to see who was faster or slower. This kind of person was extremely frightening. It was possible that their battle prowess was a considerable number of times stronger than even that of the holy sons and holy daughters in the same cultivation level. Fu Tonghai was sure that Bei Shiming definitely had no lack of such elites that would follow alongside him into the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm with his identity. Then, as long as he encountered Ling Han, the latter would definitely die without a doubt. That's right, there is also the Shao clan, and the Han clan as well. Fu Tonghai suddenly recalled that Ling Han was really a troublemaker. He was only in the severing mundane tier, but he had actually offended a great many 2-star and 3-star forces. The fact that he'd managed to continue living until today was practically a miracle. However, the miracle will be ending now because this time I, Fu Tonghai, will be organizing everything. His killing intent soared. The fate of anyone who was not useful to him naturally was death. Who asked Ling Han to be too useful such that he directly affected the balance of power between the four great heirs. Even if I don't make a move, the other two probably wouldn't be able to remain calm either. A sliver of a cold smirk appeared at the corners of Fu Tonghai's lips. He was referring to Fu Xiaoping and Fu Bingbing. How could these two people not be anxious as well? They had to be anxious. It was just that they should be aware that they could not compete with Fu Gaoyun, and thus simply chose not to recruit Ling Han at all. Wouldn't it be even better to directly kill this guy in the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm with a trap? And that would end the matter once and for all. Ling Han, if you still manage to escape this time around, I will take your surname. He turned his head and glanced at the manor behind him. Then, taking a step forwards with a flutter of his sleeve, he disappeared without a trace. In the main hall, Ling Han was rubbing his chin, feeling slightly wronged. Initially, he had not planned to do anything special when he had come to the Fu clan. His main motive was merely to investigate the whereabouts of the Rock Palace. Why had so many things happened for no reason like this? So strange. Don't think about it. You were just a magnet for trouble. If nothing happened when you went somewhere, that would be truly strange indeed. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden walked to his side, leaning against him. Ling Han wrapped his wife in his arms, smelling the perfume in her hair, and asked, "How can anyone say that about her husband?" The heavenly phoenix divine maiden giggled. Being married to such a man, there was really no need to worry about the lack of color in one's life. Life was always so exciting. "I want it," she said softly by Ling Han's ear, her voice incredibly seductive. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.